Well, good evening, everyone, and I'd like to welcome you all and call to order our Lucan Biddulph Council meeting for Tuesday, March the 2nd. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Today was a good day for our community and the communities across Middlesex. The Middlesex London Health Unit, as announced yesterday, has been able to open up COVID vaccine availability to broader demographics, including, but not limited to, citizens over 80. In just 2 hours this morning, 5,000 COVID bookings were made. That's 11 days of vaccine appointments. If this is any indication of support of the vaccine rollout, then I would say things look very promising. It's been such a hard go, and at times we've all felt very overwhelmed. So this vaccine news is incredibly welcome. I know that I've shared with you that at times I've felt the weight of the global crisis, as I'm sure you have from time to time, over what has been just about a year. And I was feeling a bit of this last week and into the weekend. A friend of mine happened to share a news story with me from CBC Calgary. And it was an interview with a 97-year-old woman about resiliency and getting through these times. And my goodness, what a lift her spirit gave me. If you get the chance, I would encourage you to take a look for the video and watch it. You will be inspired. She had lots of advice, but what really struck me was this: do what you can and get on with it. Take things as they come. You know, that's incredibly sage advice. So often we push ourselves and our expectations to do so much, especially during these times, and often we burn ourselves out. We are in a great position now. There is light at the end of the tunnel. We will, in fact, we are getting through this. So let's all just do what we can and get on with it. This evening, we will be discussing our budget. And the budget process is an important one for council to go through and participate in. It allows us to understand and determine priorities for not only the present year, but plan for future projects in future years. It brings together all the guiding principal documents to develop a financial plan and put an eye on what our community will look like over time. I am looking forward to Catherine's presentation and the discussion that will take place. I want to thank Catherine for her leadership and the staff for putting all of this together. To council, thank you for your diligence and your passion for your community that helps as we develop this document. Together, we are all working towards making Lucan Biddulph the best community it can be. So Catherine, at this time, I'm pleased to hand it over to you, and you can walk us through the proposed 2021 budget.
Okay, thank you and good evening, everyone. So I'm pleased to present to Council the 2021 operating and capital budgets. The draft budget was tabled at the February 16th Council meeting. Council and the public were invited to review the details and the notes and to submit questions and comments by February 25th. We did not receive any questions or comments in that time. This process has been an interesting challenge given the unpredictability of the pandemic. But as we know, things can change from day to day, but we must draw a line in the sand at some point. So as I'm going throughout the presentation, I will pause after each section, or not each slide, but each section. I'll let you know, ask for any questions or comments. You still have the opportunity to do that. And that's important too, if you have any. All right, so we'll start by looking at our various revenue streams available to the general government budget. So of course, our main source of revenue is from taxation. And this budget has been prepared to include a 1% increase to the municipal portion of the tax rate. This will result in additional tax revenue of about $46,798. The vast majority of the tax revenue comes from residential and farm property classes. And we do expect that industrial tax dollars will increase as industrial land continues to be developed. So what does this mean for the average homeowner? 1% increase in the municipal portion of the tax rate would increase their annual tax bill by about $17 if their assessment stays the same. But the municipal portion is only one of three components of the tax rate. The other two are, of course, the county levy and the education levy. The county is currently working on their budget, and we don't know the tax rates for 2021 at this time. But I'm not expecting they'll change too much. And the education rate set by the province will not change from 2020 for residential properties. For commercial and industrial properties, the province has reduced the education rate significantly for 2021. You can keep going down the next.
Catherine, Dave, just sorry, refresh my memory, just on the pipeline again. What does that represent, or how does, sorry, just what does pipeline again mean, or definition, or our definition? That tax bill.
That's like the like union gas lines and stuff like that.
Okay, gotcha. All right, thanks.
So the assessment.
Can I ask a question, Catherine? Sorry, it's Daniel.
Yeah.
Sorry, on that one sheet, I'm looking at the number. It's for residential, it's 549 million. Am I reading that right? Or is that there's 6 digits there? Or
on the assessment value?
No, just I'm sorry. Maybe I'm ahead of the page. Sorry,
Yeah, you can go down to the.
Yeah, maybe the next page after that. Sorry.
The next one, yeah. So this is that's the assessment value of all our residential property.
Sorry, okay, my mistake, sorry.
Nope, that's fine. You can ask questions. So this table represents our assessment growth. And it's significantly smaller in 2021. And that's part because the 2020 market value assessment the update was postponed due to COVID. So this means that there will be no assessment growth related to the planned reassessment period, and 2021 property assessment will be the same as 2020 values, which is the fully phased in January 2016 values. Unless, of course, there have been specific changes to properties. So that's anything you need a building permit for, like, of course, new structures or pools, or reverse assessment like demolitions. So you can see on this one for 2021, there's only a 2.4% change in the weighted assessment overall. And if I look back to 2020's budget presentation, and that number overall was 10.41%. So there's not a lot of growth. Any of those numbers represent is growth, is pure growth, not any change in traditional assessment. Any questions more about the tax rates?
Catherine, just on that, obviously we're not the only community that is not going to see changes in their assessment this year because of COVID. Has there been any discussion, or have you heard anything about what their plan is for 2021? I mean, obviously, the hope would be that that they would, to use the words that I used in my opening words, get on with it. I mean, we've all found a way to work. They should be able, MPAC should be able to do the same thing. So I just wondered if you've heard anything with your peers as to what the plan is for 2021, because I guess the thought would be at some point those dollars will be realized.
Correct. So no, at this time, there hasn't been any word on when those reassessments will take place. So if they continued with the reassessment in 2020, they're going to target the assessment date would be as of January 2019 for market values. I don't know if they'll continue to use that date, or if they'll bump it forward and use a 2020 date, or continue to prolong this, but there hasn't been any communication in regards to that, when that will happen. So we're all just waiting to see. So if no more questions on the taxation, then I'll move on to expenses for general government. So the expenses are broken out in this diagram, And you can see that the three largest pieces of the pie are Public Works, the Roads Department, Protective Services, which includes your police, fire, building inspectors, bylaw officers, crossing guards, health and safety, animal control, and the conservation authorities. And then the biggest one is reserves. So reserves, that represents what the township is putting away or saving for future projects for like vehicles, equipment, roads, building, parks, and tax stabilization. And then to present a balanced budget, there was a small draft budget surplus of about $27,800. And if you look in the detailed budget, you'll see that that has been placed in the tax rate stabilization reserve. But council can choose to place anything like that kind of a surplus either in another reserve or change spending in another category. So just keep that in mind when we get to the end. If I had to place it somewhere, that's typically where we put it, but it's not a big number. That is up to council to decide where they'd like to place that. So the other slice of the pie is administration, which includes all the admin salaries, benefits, insurance, utilities, EDC, Bacon Fest, Canada Day, legal, and IT. And then some of the things to point out that have changed that are larger than previous years were repairs and maintenance at the municipal office will include a one-time cost of $6,000 to upgrade the generator to new safety standards. You'll see this as a common theme in the departments that have a generator. All of them require the safety standard upgrade. Insurance, it renews each September 1st. We have assumed a 10% increase to rates for the last 4 months of the year. For both fire departments, the budget includes a levy transfer increase of 5%. And then we have the online building permit program, which is called Cloud Permit, has annual costs of $13,250. And this is a new expense line for 2021. Previously, this cost was covered by our efficiency reserves during initial setup. The Community Improvement Plan, or CIP, was initiated in 2020, and the budget for 2021 includes $30,000 to cover projects identified in that process. In regards to garbage and recycling, there were minimal increases to the fees from blue water recycling, so therefore we're not proposing an increase to the bin fees for 2021. They were increased in 2020. So we'll look at the Public Works roads piece of the general government expenses. So this diagram shows the breakdown of those. The larger piece here includes things like all the repairs and maintenance of the equipment, the public works shop utilities, insurance, tools, sidewalk maintenance, drainage, culverts, tree planting and trimming. Salaries and benefits are allocated over all the categories except street lighting. Some items to note in public works. Again, the one-time cost for the generator upgrades is here. We also included the cost of 2 radar speed signs at $6,000 each. And the budget for roadside drainage expenses increased by $30,000. This is to increase service and correct some problem areas within the township. You can go to the next slide, Lisa. So in 2020, we assumed 2 new subdivisions. Therefore, we have increased the line painting budget by $7,000 to paint new pedestrian crossings in these areas to increase safety. A large portion of the Whalen line was uploaded to Middlesex County in August of 2020. Another section we continue to share with Perth South, who takes care of the maintenance for a fee that has been included. Given that we don't have to maintain this road, the budget for diesel and sand salt has been decreased by $17,000. However, as part of the agreement with the county, we have one-time costs for the first year of maintenance. This was split over the months related to each year, so 5 months in 2020 and 7 months for 2021. And the expense was then further split between winter control and hardtop maintenance. And the total expense for 2021 is $41,563. And that's just the one time. Any questions on general government?
Questions from anyone? I just have a couple. Just like with the generator upgrades, I guess this is an unfair question because we can't look into the future, but we're assuming that once these upgrades are done, then that will bring them up to where they're supposed to be now, and that's good for their lifetime, or how does that work?
I'm gonna ask Jeff to answer that if he can.
If I may, Madam Mayor, our generators, it depends on the use of the generator. And I don't mean to get too complicated, but if the facility is classified as an emergency structure, then we have to follow all regulations. So as TSSA adjust their regulations in generators, we have to keep maintaining our generators to meet those specifications and standards. So we are tied as those specifications and standards change. We have to keep up with them to maintain our generators to meet those needs. If your generator is not classified as an emergency generator, you have much more leniency. You still have to follow a number of the rules, but you certainly makes it a little bit more easier than what we're going through right now.
Okay, thanks. And then I also had a question just on the radar signs. So Jeff, you might want to take this one on as well. Are these going to be two movable ones throughout the community I guess, I know there's been a lot of demand for the one that we've got that we can move throughout the community. So will these two be movable?
Yeah, and Madam Mayor, there was a request for two signs, one movable and one stationary, and tied to the second stationary one was that there's discussions with a donation towards that sign, so as we go forward, that second speed sign is not so much tied to get as it is to put in and start looking at and maybe follow up with a donation towards it. And then it's looking at the donation is coming out of the Granton area, and that it would be a stationary sign that could be used in Granton. But the first one, the one is a movable sign to give us two signs that we can move around the entire township.
So the idea would be the one that would be stationary would be purchased through donations. So we wouldn't purchase that until the donation had been made.
That's correct. My understanding is that when we discuss that further, that it will be tied to a donation.
Okay. So I guess my question would be, then should it actually be a budgeted item in that it's an in and an out? I mean, we have lots of things that are in and outs that are budgeted, but if that donation doesn't come doesn't come through this year, should we have it as a budgeted item?
I guess if it's something that council does want to have two, then you have it there. But if you'd only like to have one in there for purchasing, then we could certainly reduce that line item if council would like to do that.
It's Alex here. So we do have an offer of a donation from the Granton Park Committee. And there's been other individuals who have been interested in donating as well. I'm not certain that we knew that it was going to be $6,000, but I knew it was going to be up there somewhere. So it's going to take a little bit of time to get those donations collected. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not certain that we're going to be able to get all of it right away. But we would like to see the sign ordered if it's possible so that we can have it in place and then continue to make donations and collect donations over time. I'm just hoping council will be able to support that idea.
Okay. I think maybe that was all I had at this point.
May I ask a question, Madam Mayor?
Yeah, certainly.
It's Daniel.
Yep.
The public works, thank you. It's maybe for Jeff or for Catherine. Public works roads, Catherine, you mentioned that the salaries and benefits are sort of spread throughout those categories. I'm just wondering why it's not separate, and why it doesn't just show there at what the salaries and benefits are for staff for public works roads.
Well, in this diagram, I just lumped those categories together, but you can see if you look at the detailed budgets, you can see
Right.
what, you can see salary lines on all of those. And we have to allocate cost to those certain categories that are mandated. And then we have to use those categories in the FIR, which is the financial information return that's sent to the province. So we kind of split the cost as we can, but if you want to see the details, they are in the detailed budget under those sections.
All right, thank you. I should have researched better. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. There's no other questions for general. I'll move on to Parks and Rec. So this Parks and Rec department has seen the greatest effect of the restrictions during the pandemic. So it was difficult to predict what services and what level of services we could include in a budget. So we did our best. And we ended up with, for the ice rental revenue, we decreased it and we assumed no ice for January and February. And the ice would be installed in August for the season. And then accordingly, the part-time operator wages are included for August to December only in this budget. We also decreased revenue in other areas for like the arena floor, halls, pavilions. And there's no budget included for the canteen, vending, bar, and the craft show due to COVID restrictions. We expect will still be in place in those kinds of areas. Doesn't mean that we can't revisit that in the future, that if you collect revenue, that we don't have revenue budgeted, but we also don't have the expense of purchasing supplies for that. So you'd hope that would offset or other, it can be, it's not like it's a done deal. We don't know what COVID's going to do, but it's our best guess that we won't be able to have those types of things in 2021. We did include the swimming pool and the summer camps. We hope to run those this year as well. And then the building maintenance includes a one-time cost of $9,000 for required fire alarm improvements. So that's all I really have to say about Parks and Rec. There is more details in other reports, but again, that's probably the most affected budget from the pandemic. So it was hard to, pinpoint what to do with that exactly. So any questions on that?
Catherine.
Councilor Mastarakis?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. When you mentioned that, is there any, have you seen any benchmarking to, I know it'd be hard, municipalities of various sizes, but benchmarking in regards to revenue levy for a community center, like how much a similar sized community might be putting towards tax levies? Are we average, above average, below? Like how are we functioning? Is that something you've seen elsewhere, if I'm explaining it correctly?
You're talking about though the most big funding comes from the levy.
Right.
I haven't researched what others have done. I know that for our budget, maybe other communities, municipalities have Parks and Rec included all with general government and everything, but we had Parks and Rec has its own fund, so we have to use part of the tax levy to fund that. That's why it looks so big, whereas others might be kind of just all rolled into one. But I haven't researched others in that regard.
Well,
as far as,
it may be small, don't get me wrong. Comparatively, we may be less than other communities that were funding the community center, over time. But I was just wondering if there's some, because that's one question I get brought up once in a while is about the funding of the community center. Is that good? Is that, is it being run efficiently? Is it effective? And this could be a great number. Just wondering if there's any benchmarking, but as you said, it's tough to make comparators if they're being lumped in or separated depending on community.
correct. And another point is other municipalities may be doing their budget process a little bit differently. They might not have factored in COVID factors. They may have just stuck with, I know some have stuck with what they've budgeted in previous years as if it was a normal year. And we're trying to do a bit of both, I guess, in this one. So it might be hard to compare that as well.
Okay, no, thank you very much.
If I may, Catherine, I just have a quick comment on that.
Sure.
You can't see me. Sorry. Just as well, thank you, through you, Madam Mayor, as well. To comment on that as well, I know one thing that's been difficult in our community to help get through, to help people understand is that our department is very different now than it was, say, 7 years ago. It's not just the community center in this, it's all of the Parks and Rec for Luke and Biddulph. And I know it's very different from how Luke and Biddulph used to be. I know at one point it was just the arena was its own entity, but now it is in the entire Parks and Rec department. So I think that's an important message that we need to have out to the community. And then, and as well for other communities, it may be difficult to completely compare because they may have like an arena and then a community center, and they're not as many have a good mecca like we do where it's all combined together. So, but absolutely, it is something that can always be looked at.
Somebody have any other questions on the Parks and Rec side of the budget? I just wondered, and again, this probably isn't the year to be doing this, but maybe it's something to look to the future to do. I mean, we have made huge investments in the chiller and replacing the chiller and doing all that work, and just wondering if we're seeing the efficiencies on the utility side, and if there's a way that we can monitor that and see those savings. I don't know
If I may, through you, Madam Mayor, that is something we can put a report together for council if council wishes. We have runtime monitors on our machines. We are noticing from a staff standpoint, there is a significant improvement in how it operates. We don't have the exact finite numbers. Obviously, with COVID-19, it hasn't been easy to compare to a normal year, but there isn't even ways we could look at, say, like a couple months that we were open this year or last year, pardon me, and compare to, say, 2019 or 2018, just to see an idea of what we may be, the improvements we may be seeing. But a good example for right now is that even putting the ice in on a normal time, it would take, we'd start the machines in the morning and we wouldn't have the king valve that controls the suction. It wouldn't be fully open until about maybe 3-4 in the morning. This year it was turned on at I believe 9 o'clock in the morning, and we had it fully open by 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's the huge, you can see it being way more efficient that way, as well as being brought down to the temperature for ice. In a normal year, that would take an entire weekend. We would turn it on a Friday and we wouldn't be ready to build till the Monday. This year it was down to temperature by, so started at 9 a.m. It's down to temperature by 5 p.m. That's a huge, significant improvement. So I very much love to show the comparisons once we have numbers to bring forward.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments for Parks and Rec? If not, I'll move on to capital projects.
Catherine, just one follow-up. If I recall correctly, Paul and I went for a course on the Parks and Rec side, arena management, health and safety. And one of the biggest risks, you can correct me, Paul, if I'm wrong, is the arena chiller and refrigeration in municipalities that can cause injury damage in a community. It's one of the highest risks. So one large benefit, obviously, to that improvement is the health and safety. Was that correct, Paul? Did I recall that?
Absolutely. So by reducing our ammonia load in the system, by improving to this new chiller, that increased our safety immensely, as well as with the new chiller. We had a really good training course that we had with all of the staff for ammonia safety. A nice little reminder, nice refresher as we were starting brand new. It was actually quite good, led by the Bird refrigeration team. And we're arranging the same thing for our fire department, just for another new refreshment. And it's far safer, and we keep adding more improvements as we can each year to make sure we're getting better and better.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, so excuse me. So I'll move on to capital projects. So these were discussed at a special council meeting last November. And the next few slides show the proposed capital projects and the funding for these for 2021. I'll just go through them briefly. So in public works roads, we have the continuing project for the traffic lights on Saintsbury. And this is to be funded by developer contribution. The Frank Street roadwork, this is a joint project with water and sewer, and it's to be funded by the road construction reserve. We have a bridge replacement on Roman Line, and this was a result of the bridge study that was done, and it's a big number. So we propose to be funded by the majority by OCIF and federal gas tax, and the remaining amount from road construction reserve. And then Alice Street, Saintsbury Line, and the Queen Street by the water tower and Lucan. The values listed here are for the projects are for engineering only, with potential construction for 2022. And these will be funded by road construction reserve. The asset management software solution, citywide, is one of the programs available. And this is to be funded by the efficiency or modernization reserve. I say that's the same thing. It's just a different word. The sand salt storage shed. We need to look for alternative storage, since the sharing arrangement with the MTO shed may no longer be possible. But we did apply for a grant that would cover 100,000 of this project, but it was recently denied. Therefore, if council would like to continue with this project, then it will need to be funded entirely by building reserve, or we have to look for other sources. If we want to continue with that for this year. And under Parks and Rec, we have the two playground equipments, which were carryovers from 2020, and they'd be funded by the arena reserves. The ball diamond lights at the community center are up for replacement, but there may be an opportunity to switch to LED lights and perhaps some savings from that. And that'll be funded by arena reserve. Under administration, we have the township website that update that was started in 2020 and is to be completed soon. And that will be funded by the efficiency reserve. And then we want, for new for this year, will be council chamber updates to add equipment to allow for live streaming of meetings, should we get to meet again in person, or some hybrid of that. And that'll be funded by the efficiency reserves. And then finally, we have our ongoing loan payments, and payments are covered by rent payments, interest payment from the county, and the remaining from the building reserve. So I just want to go back to our sand salt shed project. And since our ISIP, so the grant we had was ISIP COVID-19 Resilience Infrastructure Stream. The application for funding was denied, but we were given the opportunity to submit another project in order to receive our funding allocation under this stream. So the municipality was allocated $100,000, but you just don't get the money, you have to actually apply for it. So a new project we had for an idea would, one of the categories is for playground infrastructure within parks, and tennis courts is included as an example. So Staff would like to apply to install the tennis courts at the park in the old Clover subdivision. And staff feels that this funding can be used to create a nice multi-use space at the park. For example, the tennis courts can also be used for pickleball, which we know is a popular sport in the area. And the deadline for the new application is this Friday, March 5th. So I just wanted to ask council if they have any really oppose that idea, or if we can just go ahead and apply for funding for that. And then we'll also have to talk about the sand salt shed if we want to pursue that this year, or come back to council with that discussion in a future meeting.
Okay, why don't we tackle the, I guess the tennis court discussion first. Councillor Masterakis.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. So if we don't apply for this, do we, this Friday, do we lose the opportunity to apply for the 100,000 for some other projects?
Yes. The deadline for the application was originally last December, and then when they denied, they said we have an opportunity to apply for a new project, but the deadline is this Friday. I don't know if there'll be further opportunities if that project continues to be denied again, but.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from council on the possible movement of the tennis court? I get my reaction would be yes. I mean, I know that I sat in on a Parks and Rec committee meeting where we talked about, you know, tennis courts, pickleball, how we could do that. Certainly, there's no secret that should we be going ahead with the renovation to the arena, you know, something's going to have to, something could be, we could potentially be losing those tennis courts, so they have to be moved somewhere. I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming that Councillor Masterakis might be feeling the same way I am about, you know, having to make this decision quickly. But I certainly don't want to leave $100,000 on the table. You know, the province has been very generous with funding, but, you know, at some point you think that's going to have to stop. So I would certainly be supportive of staff going ahead with that project and putting that application in.
I'll make the motion to move forward with the application.
Okay, Councillor Masterakis, and I think Ron can probably, and Tina can work on the wording of that. Can we get a seconder for that? Councillor Regan, any discussion, any further discussion? All opposed? And that's carried. So that's good, move ahead with that one. And then the sand salt storage. So maybe, I mean, Catherine did give a little bit of background on that, but maybe we can just talk about timing as to when the project has to be done. Does it have to be done this year? Do we know if there's a little bit of negotiating that we can have with the province on when we have to be out of that facility?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, so we've had a couple of meetings now with the MTO, and their request each time has been that we discontinue use come the end of this winter season. We had hoped through the funding stream that we could accommodate the shed and move forward with that. I think there's room to talk to the ministry if we need to push that off a year. I don't think it's not, in my opinion at this point, unless something really drastically changes, I think we have to make a decision to build something. But I believe that we could discuss another year to be there if we had to.
Deputy Mayor Manders.
So Jeff, do you have that conversation sooner than later? And then just to confirm that you're comfortable with another year, because otherwise I think it's inevitable, this expense, this isn't a case of, maybe not. It's either 100% this year or 100% next year, it sounds like. So I guess, as long as you're confident in that extra year, I'm fine myself delaying it 1 year, but it makes no difference to me either way. So.
Yeah, I can have that conversation right away. That's not a problem.
Thanks.
Any other comments on that? So maybe we just put a highlight beside that project and Jeff can get more information and report back. Since it's coming out of reserve, it would be coming out of reserves then, right? That project. So it would not affect the tax rate, would it?
Correct. At this point, it's just you can use this existing savings from reserves.
Okay.
Because the capital budget has its own fund. Yeah. The tax rate was mostly affected by what we talked about in general government and parks and rec. So that's what would affect those kinds of things. If you don't have reserves, then you could always put more into reserves if you need to, but then that could affect the tax rate as well. So, is there any other questions about capital at this point? Looks like no. So I'm not going to talk about the water and wastewater budgets because those will be discussed by Jeff when we get to the water rate public meeting at 6:30. So we're kind of ahead of time, but just want to talk about the next steps, then what council have to do. So once of course, council have to approve the budget at some point. It could be done either later this evening once you've heard the water and wastewater discussion. It can be as presented or of course as amended if we want to make changes, or it can be put off to a future meeting if you just have council would have to make a motion to accept or however you want to do with the budget at this point. And then after we get the final county and school board tax rates, then we'll bring forward a tax rate levy bylaw, and that will be presented to council once we know that information. But that doesn't have to happen until July to pass that. But I'm expecting we'll have information in the next month or so about what the county is doing, and I'm hoping that the budget can be passed sooner than later. But that's just my recommendation. It's up to council what they'd like to do. That's all I really had for that. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Catherine. So as Catherine said, we've got some time for discussion. I know, actually, I do have a few other questions that I want to circle back on, but before I hit mine, just wondered if there was any other discussion, questions about any of the, and I'm going to use the word departments, but I think you'll understand, budgets that have been presented and broken down. If there was any questions on any of the line items, either as Catherine highlighted or things that you saw in your review as you reviewed the budget. Councillor Reagan.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I just wanted some clarifications about the sand salt issue. This is a storage shed. Are we leaving it that Jeff's going to have a meeting, come back with us, and we're going to do something with that this year? My concern is if we can move forward, and I know we have time, but if we can move forward with it this year, we don't know what's going to happen next year. And I'm just wondering if we should, because again, I'm just unclear as to whether or not we're going to do it this year or next year. And I would, and with what the deputy mayor said, I'm probably more inclined to try to push forward with this year because we can do it. Like I said, I know we're not sure about next year. So I'm just asking for clarification of just sort of where did we leave that?
I think we left at it that Jeff was going to go talk to MTO and the contractor to see if we could get another year. And and then I guess come back and then we can have that discussion. But if council wants to just push forward, that's, you know, that's collectively what can be
Right.
decided tonight as well. So.
All right, okay. So we're gonna wait for Jeff to come back is what I'm asking, I guess, so.
I think, I mean, I think I would probably be more comfortable just knowing, having a little firmer idea on the timeline.
Right.
Maybe
Okay. Okay, all right, no, thanks.
if other councillors feel that way. Any other comment? Councillor Mastrakis, did you?
No, I was just going to support waiting another meeting for an information from Jeff Lynn.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any questions or comments on the line items? I just had a couple. And going back to the general government section, a couple areas, just election line item. And while the election isn't until next year, and which we will experience obviously an increase in that budget line, I wonder if there was anything else that needed to be done in preparation, given that any changes that we make have to be done this year. I know that there had been discussion of possible having to rework boundaries to wards, and whether we would be in a position to do that for this election, or is that more of a reality for the next election?
Ron, or do you want me to? Okay. To you, Madam Mayor, I think for 2022, I think we're fine for this budget line item for this season. I don't think we will see any changes to ward boundaries quite yet. The percentages aren't high enough to do that. So, but I do think come 2026, I think for sure there will be a need to revisit what's happening in particular wards.
Okay, good. I just didn't want to lose sight of that.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it be, you know, late.
We will still bring forward a report on kind of where we're at, and so council can see visually kind of where our numbers at for each ward and what we're planning on, moving forward, going back to alternative voting again, and requesting approval to RFP the same company, that sort of thing. So there will be some reports coming for us soon.
Okay, good. Thank you. And then I know in the past we've had informal discussions about at what point does our community, is it at the point where we should have our own CBO, or even bylaw or a bylaw officer, or I just wondered if that had been a discussion either with the working group, or whether staff has talked about that as when that possibility might happen. I mean, I think that what we get with our contracted service, I think it is a good bang for the buck. I think it's a good deal for us for sure, being a contracted service. But at what point does that service, should it be ours? I don't know who wants to take that. Ron?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I think sort of the pressure has come off of the chief building official. I think they've done a good job now with the cloud permit system. I think they're able to streamline their operations. They have hired a couple more people in there. So I think everybody's sort of getting used to the existing system, and I haven't heard any complaints. And I would look to council, if they've heard any, please let me know. But for the last 6 months, I haven't heard any issues whatsoever, which is always a good news for us. So I'm hoping that we can kind of continue on the way we're going. I know at one point when we were getting some complaints about they weren't responsive, and there was delays in processing permits and things like that. But I think, like I said, with the cloud permit system, things have been able to be a little more streamlined, and it's easier to process things. And I think the monitoring of everything is better. I think they've got into a good system now where the contractors know that the chief building official or the building officials are going to be in the afternoon. So, on these days or whatever, so they get into a routine, I guess you could say, about they know when they can order inspections and things like that. So like I said, I would look to council to let me know if anybody is getting complaints about it, but I'm certainly not hearing any. So, and right now this is the cheapest way to operate the chief building official, because if we were to get a full-time person, I know, Mr. Deputy Mayor, you made the comment before, what happens if all of a sudden the building, we get into a recession and the building dries up, that person's a full-time person, we still have to pay them regardless. So, that isn't an issue with the current arrangement we have with Middlesex Center. So.
Okay, good, thank you. Then the other thing I want to talk, this may be more on the capital side of things. And I know we did talk about it during our capital budget discussion, but for anybody that should be watching, that might have interest in some future projects, I guess I'm thinking about some urbanization projects that we should likely be thinking about, for the future. I guess the big thing is the street lights for Saintsbury #1, and sidewalks. I should say sidewalks for Saintsbury. That's an ongoing project, and just maybe. Again, for any residents that are watching, I believe that the rebuild of Saintsbury, and Jeff, you can correct me, for the county is 2022. I think their plan is. So at that point, we would be looking at the urbanization of that road and improving it. So I guess from a capital standpoint, do we have that money saved? Are we in good shape for that project? And then on that same vein, from on Highway 4 on Main Street, and whether it is coming out of town to where the new commercial development will be, we should be, obviously thinking about sidewalks. They kind of end at the arena. What sort of plan would there be for that? And then, of course, down the other way in the Tim Hortons Clark's area.
Madam Mayor, so the Saintsbury process, I think we are in pretty decent shape in the fact that that will be a development charge project. So we have been collecting for it, been collecting it on for a number of years, listed. We'll adjust when we do go to build that project. We'll then readjust the figures that we spend there. We can readjust our development charges and continue to draw out till we get enough money to cover that on Saintsbury. Having said that, the one thing I want to make sure that we need to be looking at Alice Street at the same time, because the county plans to do Saintsbury and Alice Street in the same year. And we've identified that we have an issue. We actually have a couple of issues with the sanitary line on Alice, as well as the water main's been identified as one of our older ones in town. So Alice Street is a fairly long street compared to, say, Frank. So there is going to be some funds on the water and wastewater to redo Alice Street. Now the county will pay for the road portion of Alice Street because it's a county road, but at the same time we've got to then look at the boulevards, such as the curbs and sidewalks, which I think if anybody has walked down Alice Street, I don't think anybody would say that we need to fix those sidewalks up. They're in pretty rough shape in spots. So when we talk about Saintsbury and Alice, there's a number of different things going on there. DCs, sewer and water on Alice, plus some road stuff on the boulevards in Alice, and that's a big project. That's a big front end project. for the municipality. And I had a discussion with both Catherine and Ron prior the last week and said that once we get through this budget, I think the next thing we need to do is sit down and look at, for lack of a better term, a financial plan when we go to start looking at some of this. Because Ron, we also talked about extending the sidewalks in both sides of town. There's going to be a push. I think there'll be a push at Old Clover side, and I think if the Westdale project moves forward, like it's looking like, there'll be a big push to finish off the sidewalks on that side of town too. The nice part about the sidewalks moving out of town towards the office is the roadway is in pretty decent shape there. So the first part of extending lighting and sidewalks isn't going to be the end of the world for a project size. We can do that fairly good until we get into the residential properties there, and we have to start filling in a bit of ditch and that sort of thing. But that certainly is not a big project. Like, we're not talking water main and sewer and that sort of thing. So I think, and again, that will be a development charge project. So we can, once we set it up, we can start drawing back on that right away. But I think really it's the front end on those projects. We need to have a financial plan in place moving forward on those. The good news is that it's very easy to collect the development charges on them. That's what development charges are meant for. The big thing is to plan for it and set up the front end on it. So.
The OCIF funding that you've got earmarked, that is already money. That's like the money that we're entitled to. Like, we don't have to apply for that. That's the money that they tell us every year that we get, right?
Correct. That's our allocation.
That's our allocation. Okay, on that. And then I do want to circle back to the radar sign, and I know it's just $6,000, but I guess I think that I'm looking to Councillor Westman, because I'm thinking he'll be a conduit with that community. But has there been anything that has been concrete as to what we can expect from that community? And do we have that in writing? And what is the plan going forward? And I guess I'm asking this, and it's not in a way to deny them the radar sign. I think that it's a great place where that radar sign has been. It's just the one that's stationary in Lucan was fully funded with donations, and I guess I would feel more comfortable with either having dollars in hand or, you know, some sort of plan for how this one was going to be paid for.
All right, Madam Mayor, I've actually, while we were talking here, I connected with their park committee. They have a firm commitment of $2,000. When we first kind of floated the idea, I reached out to the community and said, "Oh, what's your interest?" And I got a handful of people that were interested in donating. One was looking to donate 500. There's a few 100s, a few 50s in there. So, I mean, there is an interest there, but we haven't really had the, I guess, the go ahead to, it's kind of putting the cart before the horse, or the horse before the cart, right? So I was kind of waiting to see what council's interest was and what the cost of it would be. I feel fairly confident that we can, get some money from the community. I mean, having dollars in hand, I could get the donation from the park committee relatively quick, and that's a third of the cost of it right off the bat. I have reached out to other people and what have you, and have tentative commitments. Obviously, it's one of those things where we need to nail those down and get checks in hand. So. And I understand it's, the other one was fully funded, and the goal here is to raise money through the community, because there was an awful lot of interest from people. There's a lot of concern on the main street here of vehicles coming through town at high speed, and there's, with the bus stop right here in the middle of town, and lots of kids, it's a small town, they're going to go visit their friends across the street and what have you. So there's a lot of interest in that. So I do feel confident that we'll be able to embark on some pretty aggressive fundraising. And but it was kind of one of those things where you're waiting for the pricing and the what council's position is on the unit and going from there. So
Jeff, when would you be looking at ordering them? And what's the turnaround time on getting them? Do you know offhand?
Madam Mayor, I'm not sure about the turnaround time on that. With everything that's been going on in the last little while with the with businesses, I would have to find that out. I'd have to call, but I would recommend that we move forward sooner than later, because I'll be honest with you, the requests on the radar signs are huge. I mean, I already have a list of places those radar signs are going, and people have been wanting them out there in the middle of the winter. It's been that much. So if it was me, I'd be looking to going right after budget and getting some firm quotes and seeing what we got there. Doesn't mean, and on the only other thing I would say I would add to the Granton thing is when we did take the sign there the first time, there is speeding. There is a real percentage of speeders coming through Granton. So, it certainly would be a spot that definitely could use a little more awareness. That's for sure. I would support a sign going there for sure. So.
And the county is okay with it being permanent there?
Yeah, I mean, we would have to get permission, obviously, to mount something there. But Chris and the county have been excellent at everything they can do to try and slow traffic down in towns and that sort of thing. They've been really good at working with us on that sort of thing. So, but yeah, we would have to get permission just to make sure that the spot is okay for them. But yeah, no, I don't see that being a problem though.
Deputy Mayor, did you have your hand up?
No, I was just going to say another option maybe would be the sign, could be purchased at the time of the fundraising finish, but just have the signs rotate into Granton and into the area, the rural area. I mean, basically, Saintsbury, which is, half of Alex's ward and half of Peter's ward. But it's just, to me, these, there's every door you knock on, everyone complains about signs, like Jeff saying that list that he's got for signs, I mean, is everywhere in our community. So to me, we need to if we, if we're going to use the community money, it should be, I feel like all residents of the Lucan Badal, we should have it should just rotate around. The sign should rotate and be within our whole community. At the time of full fundraising, that someone feels that passion needs to be situated somewhere full time only, that's the time it should be purchased. That's my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Just no different than the gardens and the dog park and anything we do. If when it meets the threshold and the level, it's just done. I mean, to me though, the sign is there just as much as it would be anywhere, as we continue to drive to have these signs everywhere in our community. So, and I think we want to be careful too, just having people stroke checks. Like, it's not just a person stroking a check, but people stroking checks. All of a sudden you could have one on every street. I think we need to be careful with this, because then we also have the maintaining, replacing bulbs, lights, when they get just like we had with our crosswalk, when they become discontinued. I mean, this expense today is probably a replaceable in 6-7 years. That'll be on the ratepayers at that time. And I don't mean all these signs that we're talking about. So I just like the idea of it rotating around the community, but just myself. But somebody's going to fundraise and feel that adamant about it being there. It just gets purchased at the time. my 2 cents.
So then I guess the question is the direction that Public Works purchases 2, and then there's 3 that rotate through the community, or do they just rotate, just purchase 1, and that should the grant community be able to fundraise for 1, then you purchase the 3rd. Like, I know that Jeff has a huge list, and probably 3 rotating signs would, be useful, but is that too much? I don't know. Jeff?
Madam Mayor, and I would say 3 in our community would be a little much for rotation. I would be confident that we could probably rotate 2 and have an aggressive program. But I have a feeling that 3, yeah, we could probably put 3 out there for the first year, a year and a half. But I think gradually we catch up to the demand. And I think rotating 2 to me makes perfect sense. I'm not sold on rotating 3 unless it was like we talked on the Granton one, we talked about rotating it from side to side of the street. Having 2 poles positions that we could rotate it in Granton and have set places for it. But I'm not sure we need 3 rotating signs through the whole township.
Okay. Well, I have to say that I obviously I'm the one that's been questioning it. I guess I would feel more comfortable if there was something more firm, and that there was more of the direction from the residents in Granton. It's great that the park has come up with 1/3 of it, but I don't know if I'm personally comfortable committing to a permanent 1 at this point, although it's a great location. So I don't know what the direction should be then. Any other thoughts or comments? Ron?
Madam Mayor, I think what I'm hearing is that the recommendation would be to buy the 1 sign, and that the 2nd sign be authorized for purchase once the full funding, the $6,000 comes in from all the fundraising efforts from Grant. Is that accurate?
I would be comfortable with that. That's how I would be comfortable with that. I don't know the rest of my colleagues.
That would give Jeff authority to sort of just move forward and not have to bring it back to this table, if he could be given direction in that manner.
Do you want that in the form of a motion, or I don't know? I'm looking to my colleagues to see if I could be off base. Maybe you're not thinking the same way I am. So I'd be looking. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'm fine with that motion. I mean, it's not that we're not denying any, like Madam Mayor, you made that's a good point or a good spot. When I went door to door campaigning, you'd be hard pressed to talk to a lot of people that don't feel their door is the best spot. So the best spot is anywhere in our community. That's the best spot. There is nobody that feels they have no speed issues that I know of. So this here is fun. Like we've never had this type of discussion to pre-purchase anything of a want, but just without the fundraising. The community still is going to get a radar sign. They are going to get it just like the rest of our community. Just like I'm kind of baffled even at much of the discussion here. It just doesn't. Yeah, I mean, when the fundraising's done, they call the public works manager. Public works manager orders a sign to the fully of the fundraising. Not denial at all. There's no denial in this. It's gonna rotate. I don't know. So unless I'm not reading this right. So
Ron.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I think Dave, if I understand what you're saying, that the location in Granton, the main street of Granton, will be in the rotation for the mobile sign, is what you're saying. So they'll continue in the rotation until such time as the money's raised for a permanent sign, and at that point, then they'll get the permanent sign. Yep.
Okay, so, and I don't mean, and I'm sorry if I'm confusing things, but then it's just one sign that we're purchasing this year, and then the second one will be purchased upon completion of the fundraising. That would be, so that, yeah, right? Councillor Masterakis, did I see your hand up?
Yes, and I was just trying to understand the pieces as well. And to Dave's point, Granton's coming to the table to buy a sign, but we put signs in our community already in Lucan rather than Lucan Biddulph, Lucan rather than Granton at the taxpayers' cost. Is that correct? So now this sign, if it's going to Granton, is taxpayers plus the Granton community that's paying for the sign potentially.
So we have two signs and Jeff can correct me. Maybe I'm confusing everything, but we have two signs already.
Right.
One is permanent and it's at the arena. And that one was purchased through a donation. Somebody
Okay.
for the community. And then the second one, like we purchased it. When I say we, the collective municipality, and that's the one that rotates through the community. So right now there's a recommendation to purchase two more. One would be permanent in Granton based on fundraising, and one would supplement all these other requests that the Public Works Department has to rotate around the community.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay.
So I guess the change in the budget would be just purchasing one at this point.
Yeah. And I would support that motion then.
Okay.
Right.
So do you, I guess I'm looking to Ron and Tina and Catherine, do you need a motion to change that line item, or how does that work? Ron?
If I may, Madam Mayor, just a question to our treasurer. Catherine, was there a $6,000 donation identified as a revenue in the draft budget? I just want to confirm that.
Good point.
No, we just increased the street, road and signs budget line by $12,000 for this year. So you can either keep the budget the same and maybe there'll be other signs that come up or other traffic calming things that want to be purchased with that fund, or you can reduce the budget by 6,000, which will then allow you to put 6,000 more into the tax stabilization reserve. And then you just, when you go to approve the budget, it'll be as amended, or I come back with those changes and then present again with those changes.
Okay, so Madam Mayor, through you, so yeah, exactly what Catherine just said. We, based on the previous discussions here, will reduce the sign component or line item by 6,000, and that subsequently increases the amount put into the reserve by an equivalent amount.
So that would be 33,000, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, any other further discussion? And I confused anybody on that, I apologize. If not, then I believe we are 20 to 7, so we can move into the discussion with regards to sewer and water. And I believe that Jeff is going to take this over, right, Catherine? Okay.
Yeah, Madam Mayor. So I'm going to start with the rates. They'll affect the revenues. And as I go through the proposed rates, Catherine has included these rates as the revenues, just to show that what our budget would look like. So I'll start in with the capital on the rates, and I think this is going back a little bit because we already talked about this as on the financial plan, but I propose a 2% increase to account for inflation of the capital levies. As council is aware that through the recent water financial plan, our capital reserves need to account for inflation every year. So this is something as inflation changes, we'll keep coming back each year with a request on the capital reserve or capital levies to make sure that our reserve funds are being kept up efficiently. The capital reserves are designed, so everybody's aware, the capital reserves are designed to fund infrastructure replacement. So everything from sanitary and water mains to right up to replacement of the booster station or the tower itself. We propose through the financial plan that those capital reserves are placed in there. So when we go ahead, and I talked a little bit about, we've looked at Frank Street, and we talked a little about Alice Street. So this is where a lot of that infrastructure gets paid through, is through these capital reserves. And so I won't keep kind of beating that one. We've talked about that one a little bit. So I'd like to move to operations, because that's the one that I think needs the most discussion on operations. So I'll start with water. Well, before I start with the water system, I'd just like to say that over the last 2 years, and I think if you look at your line item budgets, you'll see some increases from 2019, 2020, and moving into 2020, and we've seen insurance rate increases of 30%. We've seen infrastructure repairs such as small water main repairs to fire hydrant repairs, that sort of thing. We've seen increases of 50% in some of those items. We've seen chemical increases of 100%. We've seen sludge costs increase well over 100%. And some of that is due to, there's no doubt about it, just increasing our volumes coming in, as well as the costs. The plants themselves are taking more and more to run. So because we're getting closer to capacity, so the chemicals are becoming much more important than they were, 2-3 years ago. So that sort of thing is getting to be more expensive. So I'll start with the water system, and the first thing I'd say is that if we did not do any increase at all, the water system will run a deficit this year. We actually, after we did all the calculations from last year, we did run a small deficit last year as well. So we're playing a bit of catch up from last year. So in that, I'm proposing that we increase the cubic meter usage 5 cents. So 5 cents for every cubic meter of water used. I'm proposing that as the increase. I'm also proposing an increase of 2% to the flat rate and 2% to the bulk water rate. And and to be honest, or to continue that, there will also be fees increase to be also included in the water system for the water meter installation and inspections. The fees increases here are to cover rising costs of installing water meters and the water usage during new residential builds. We do allow the builders to use water as they're building the houses. So we are proposing that the fees on those two items will increase as well this year. They haven't for a number of years, and I think it's time to catch those up a little bit. So with the increases that I proposed in the last little bit, the water system will have a surplus of roughly about $8,000. So it's not a lot. It's not a huge surplus. It's a little close to the line if we have something major, but we do have some reserves and that we can go on there. So I think that works out well. If you look at the average household uses 15 cubic meters a month. And if you look at the average 3-month water bill, basically we're proposing a $4.11 increase on the average residential account. So that's sort of the proposed rates increases for the water system. And before I kind of open it up, I would go to the wastewater side of things. And the wastewater side of things, we're running a bit of a surplus last year. and we have a little bit of a surplus this year. So I'm not proposing, or I am proposing a 5 cent increase to the cubic water or the wastewater usage rate as well. But I'm not proposing any other increases to the flat rate. So we hold the flat rate the same. We do have a bit of a surplus there, so I don't think we need to increase the flat rate. And that'll produce roughly about a $96,000 surplus in the sanitary side of things, although I have a report coming on Granton that will use some of that later on. But so that's the proposed rate increases. Before I go on, I'll maybe open it and we could talk a little bit about the rates before I go into the expenditures side of things.
Okay. Did anybody have any questions on the rates before? Jeff, you mentioned about water that builders use.
Yep.
So can you just maybe explain that a little bit better for me? And I guess how will those costs be recouped? Because I think that we haven't done that in the past.
We have a Madam Mayor, and we call it an inspection fee in our revenues, and we charge a fee for water, and we technically charge a fee for sanitary as well as storm, and that's for new houses. But one of those charges that's supposed to be covered is the builder has the use of water and sanitary prior to the meters going in. So while they're building it, it's there for them to have access to. So that usage of the utilities is then is charged back to them, and we call it an inspection fee for them to hook up to it. So.
And how, I guess, if there's no meters, how do we know how much they're using? Or is it's just a flat rate that we charge them?
Yeah, it's just Madam Mayor, it's just a flat rate. Because we don't want the meters going in until we actually have the houses finished and completed. And then we start charging the usage flat rates and capital charges then. Yeah.
And did I hear you correctly in saying that we really haven't done a good job in the past of collecting that inspection fee?
I mean, I'm not sure about. I don't want to say haven't done a good job. I just think we've held that at a level, and we haven't reviewed that in a number of years. Particularly, even the water meter installation fee that we charge a flat fee, and we went back and we looked at everything, all the fittings and all the water meter itself, plus the time and that sort of thing, and it was time to readjust that to what other rates are, what other municipalities are charging in the county. So
okay, all right, thank you for that. Okay, anything else for Jeff right now?
Okay, I'll continue with the I think it's a good thing that we talk a little bit about the expenditure side of things. I don't want to get in, I know everybody has the line items, but I just thought I'll go to the water system, and on the expenditure side of things, again, water mains and insurance are the two big ones, and we're playing a little bit of catch up. You'll see in the line items on some of the line items under salaries and that sort of thing. Catherine and I sat down and we actually billed out. We did a bill out of everybody's time, and in those salaries, that includes office staff, my time, and actually running the system. So I think we've done a really good job there. I think Catherine's done a really great job getting that sorted out. And we're just playing a little bit of catch up this year, trying to make sure we're covering that. So I just wanted, if somebody was seeing that, wondering why that was so drastically changed there, I think that's the reason. So on the capital side of things, I don't think on the water system side, there's anything in particular to point out. I think Frank Street we are already aware of. The bulk water station, we have some money in there because the system at the water tower has become the key system is starting to give us issues. So we have to come up with a plan on how we want to move forward with the bulk water station at the water tower. The rest there is fairly straightforward. I'll move to the sanitary side of the system. One of the questions I was going to bring back to the committee in it, and our building costs were higher last year than usual. We did have a couple of breakdowns. Our alarm system at the booster station need to be replaced, as well as we upgraded some generator infrastructure at the water tower, which actually we shared costs with Fire and Quadro on. So we're recouping some of that costs, and that'll go back to 2020. So that will be a little bit lower, but the big cost there was we had to replace one of the alarm systems. So I just wanted everybody to know that in those building repairs, that's why it was a little bit unusual that how high it was there. So, and again, I already touched base on chemicals and sludge disposal, and these two, because we are starting to close up our capacities, our volumes are going up, particularly on the sludge and Granton. We're finding that we're moving it more often because of it allows the plant to run more efficient. So that's increasing the cost, as well as we just set up a new contract over the next little while. So we've seen some increase on the sludge side of things. So other than that, everything else, I just wanted to, the big one I wanted to jump down to was Chestnut. Chestnut Station is a pumping station that most of Lucanfield feeds through. So it was back a number of years ago, was proposed for upgrades to that pumping station. Stantec was given the task of doing the preliminary work and providing a list of repairs or / upgrades to the township, which they did, and they brought forward last fall. And in that list, there was close to a number of items that amounted to almost $700,000 in upgrades. We took that list and we sat down with staff and Aqua, the operator, and we reviewed that list, and plan, because when Stantec started the review of the pumping station, Lucan hadn't taken off like we have the last few years, and for growth. So one of the items that kind of triggered this was the replacing of the pumps at Chestnut. They were actually talking about lowering the horsepower because they're actually maybe too strong for the system. But we're looking at it now, and we're looking at the volumes coming through Chestnut, and we really agree, staff and Aqua, that maybe that's not the right way to go right now, that with the increase in capacity, we don't really need to be going to smaller pumps there. That really what we do need to do is put different drives on them, so we can have variable drives on them and actually control the pumping through different drives. So through a number of reviews and change ups, and one of them, one that keeps popping up on the Chestnut, is the generator. And I think that's a common theme through all the buildings. The generator, the pump drives, there needs to be an electric panel replacement at Chestnut, and there's some valving that needs to be replaced over there. But realistically, I think we're looking at about $262,000 over in Chestnut, not the $700,000 that was originally listed in the capital budget. So that would be a line item I'd like to point out that, and when we did the capital and when we were doing the budget, we hadn't got to that point. So it was, yeah, we know what the top figure is, but we've been able to kind of narrow that down and come up with the repairs that are actually needed at the Chestnut Station. So that's where that figure comes in. I would propose that we change it to 262,000 and go from there. So I'll kind of leave it there. I'm assuming there'll be some questions on that sort of those items.
The deputy mayor had his hand up.
Just Jeff, so I don't know if I'm right in saying this. So if this is attributed, I got to assume to growth, or maybe is anything you're putting in there of a larger, more expensive capacity because of growth? Like, can there be the development charges used towards this, or?
Yeah, through the mayor, that's a great question. And no, most of this is I don't want to call it repairs because it's functioning, but it's upgrades to make the system better. Right now, the existing generator doesn't meet code. The pumps are switching on and off, and they're overloading the plant when they turn on and off. They're continuously cycling back and forth. The electrical panel is just needs to be changed up out there. It's at a point now it just needs to be replaced. So no, this isn't about increased capacities or upgrades that way. It's more, yeah.
Nothing's being upsized. It's just replacing. But now, out of what you're not doing, that's going to be inevitable in time on that list of the 700,000 in time. Is any of that earmarked to potentially because of could be earmarked towards increasing the, due to the increase in capacity, or no? Is it still that whole list is just about replacement and nothing to do about our growth?
Yeah, no, and that was where, and you'll see when we get a little further with the master servicing plan, because that was our biggest concern was what is that gateway functioning like? And it turns out the Chestnut pumping station does have capacity. It is working properly, and there's no upgrades to capacity to improve due to development at the Chestnut station at this point. We don't see in the foreseeable future that Chestnut itself needs to be expanded. We'd actually have to put more sewer lines to it. We would actually have to put more sewer lines to the plant before we actually would run out of pumping capacity at that plant. It's actually in good shape that way.
Okay, thanks.
It actually, to be honest, when this project started, I believe it started about 4 or 5 years ago, before we had the growth. The plant was too big. That's what really triggered this. Was we had too much pumping capacity there, and it was really affecting the way the plant operated, because it would turn on and flood the system and then shut off and wait for a bunch of hours and then turn on, and so the real recommendation back here was to lower the horsepower, to put smaller pumps in and allow the system to run better. But after the last few years and what we predict over the next couple of years, the pumps we have will function properly.
Any other questions or comments for Jeff on that? Okay, so next steps. I see. You've got the water and wastewater rates. I guess we have to decide on that first of all. So maybe just to summarize, if I've got this right, it's a 5-cent increase to usage rates for both water and wastewater, a 2% increase to the water flat rate charge, and a 2% increase to the capital levy rates for both water and wastewater.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. And then I guess in that too, the changes to the different fees that will come forward in the fees bylaw amendment.
Exactly. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, so are there any, we'll deal with the water and wastewater, and then we'll go back to the general budget. I'm going to ask for any other further discussion on the water and wastewater rates. Seeing none, then I would ask for a motion to be made, and the motion would be that the Council of the Township of Lucan-Biddulph accepts the recommendation of the Public Works Manager as presented on March 2nd, 2021, regarding the water and wastewater rates for 2021 as follows. A 5% increase, or a 5 cent increase, 5 cent increase to usage rates for both water and wastewater. A 2% increase to the water flat rate charge, a 2% increase to capital levy rates for both water and wastewater, with each being effective January 1st, 2021, and further that staff be directed to bring forward the equivalent amendment to the fees bylaw. And I just need a mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Regan and Deputy Mayor Manders. All opposed? And that's carried. Okay, thank you. Going back to the general budget, Catherine, were there any further comments or questions that you, or I guess comments that you have, or are you clear on direction?
No, what I heard is that we'll reduce the sign line item by $6,000, and therefore that'll affect the surplus that we had will be now approximately $33,800. And then that I have placed in the tax stabilization reserve, but this time council can choose to move that to a different reserve if they choose, or keep it as I have placed it there.
Could we, in obviously a subsequent meeting, and maybe it's once this budget gets passed, could you bring a report back about where our reserves are at, so that we've got a better understanding maybe of that?
Yes, for sure.
Because since we're pulling stuff and putting it back in, putting money in, that might give us a better idea of where we are with our reserves. So if I'm not mistaken, I mean, Catherine said at the beginning of the meeting that obviously she'd like the budget to be passed sooner rather than later. And if council wants to, we can adopt it tonight, or we can just accept it for information tonight, and you can sit on it for 2 weeks and mull things over and adopt it in 2 weeks. How does council want to be to proceed? Right now, the budget would be to be adopted tonight would be just changing something here, a 1% municipal tax levy increase, and that the money be directed to tax stabilization. So, Councillor Regan.
I would be okay with moving forward in making a motion that we accept the budget.
Okay.
This evening.
Pardon me?
This evening, yes.
This evening?
Yes, please.
So you want to make that motion now?
Yes. So I'm just, sorry, go ahead.
No.
I'll second it.
Second it. Okay, so again, to review, the motion would be that the Council of the Township of Lucan-Biddulph accepts the draft 2021 budget as amended by the Treasurer on March 2nd, 2021, with a 1% municipal tax levy increase, and further that the estimated $33,800 surplus be directed to the Tax Stabilization Reserve Fund. It's been moved and second. Is there any further discussion on that? All opposed? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you very much, staff, Daniel and Dave, to the working group that did the background work, to Peter and Alex for your homework that you've done, looking forward to the year ahead, the projects. There's certainly a lot of projects on the table in front of us. But I think given the year that we've come out of, I think this is a responsible and still an exciting budget. So Catherine, once again, thanks very much. I guess I would ask this one question of you before we move off the budget discussion. This is the second year, and actually Catherine reminded me this afternoon that yesterday it marked her 2-year anniversary as an employee of Luke and Biddulph. But so this is your second budget that you've done from beginning to end. And as we've talked a number of times, you've had your challenges in front of you, what you've had to work through. And nothing has been, I would say, by the book, but are you happy with the process? Is there anything that you would do differently? Because I mean, this is what your department does. So would you look at a different timetable, that sort of thing? Because this would be, your timetable to essentially present to council as to how you would want to move forward. So is there anything that you would change, having gone through this now twice? And my thing is that engagement of the public. How can we maybe do a better job of that? And have you given that any thought?
That's a lot of questions. But yes, I have. So I've learned a lot in the last year, and I have been observing what other treasurers do in approaching the budget process. And there are some options out there. One comes to mind as far as public engagement goes, would be to do a budget survey and try to do that more in the late spring, early summer, because I would like to get a earlier jump on the budget timing, and hope to have a lot of it done and have more time to have more of those discussions with like the finance committee or working group, whatever we choose for doing with that. I think those are beneficial. It's a good use of everyone's time in that regard. So I would like to continue with that, but maybe have more time for those kinds of things earlier in the process. And then my goal would be for this year would be to have a budget presented either in December or in January. That would be the goal, pending any major things that go on in life. But that would be my goal. And then we could start with perhaps a budget survey. So I was going to work with Lisa on that. We'll talk about that once we get through this process and timing and what that looks like, and also look at what others have done to see how they reach out to their public and make it a very open, transparent process and get some feedback. So I know there's some intelligent ratepayers out there having some good ideas, and I don't want them to go get missed or not considered for future budgets. And I can, anything like that, that's their money. So me included. So there we go. That was my suggestion. That's off the top of my head at this point. So.
Well, that's good. I'm glad that you've given it some thought, and certainly we look forward to it. By the sounds of it, if you want it to be done sooner in 2021, it looks like you're just going to put this one to bed and start the process again. So it'll just be your budgets. So
I'll have to stop from do this, and then I have to close off 2020 as my next project, and then back into budget, like you said. Yes.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Masterakis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Catherine, it's night and day from what it was a few years back, the package, so that's excellent, the work you've done. One question, when you mentioned the finance committee or working group, I have seen other municipalities that have people from the community in that committee, on that committee for feedback. That you have residents sometimes, depending on what the goal of that committee is. Is that something you may be looking at as well?
It's something to consider, but I never thought of it. I never investigated that further to see how it's run in other municipalities. So it's an interesting point.
Okay, yeah, thank you. As you're looking through it, yeah, there's some communities that do put residents in, but some have terms of reference that basically what the committee's for, so it's better. Yeah, anyways, just a comment.
That could be a question on the survey about community engagement and, is that, that could form that question. Council or Deputy Mayor.
Pete, I'm just curious too, which communities do that, Pete? Can you give me a couple of them? I'm just curious which ones have ratepayers sitting in these groups.
I'll give you a deck actually that I have from Amherstburg. They've got a very well laid out.
I just wanted the closest ones to our community, the closest ones.
Yeah, I was Googling through the internet, and that's how I find them.
Oh, so just run through Google. Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Any other questions or comments at this point on for Catherine? All right, then we will move on to the rest of our agenda. But once again, thanks very much, Catherine. Okay, we do actually have to move into a public meeting to convene a public meeting under the Planning Act. I will need a motion to adjourn our regular meeting to convene the public meeting. Mover and seconder. Councillor Westman and Deputy Mayor Manders. And that's 16. All opposed? And that's carried. So we have in front of us one item for discussion. It is a fairly standard process. It's the removal of a holding zone on Kent Street. And Ron, did you want to speak to this?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to do my best Dan Fitzgerald impression. So the planner's report is included in your package tonight. Again, like you said, it's a fairly standard one. It's the removal of the holding symbol for the remaining 2 lots on the south side of Kent Street between Beach and, I guess you could say, unopened Oak Street. So it is the last 2 remaining lots that are not built on. The owners are Mr. and Mrs. Brian Smith. And I won't bore you and go through every line item in there. The purpose is to request the removal of the holding symbol, and the holding symbol is really the last step. And the reason for the holding symbol, and I think the deputy clerk actually answered this question for Councillor Reagan earlier, was that the holding symbol is usually placed on a parcel of property fairly early on when there's certain things that have to be done with regards to the installation of water mains, sanitary sewer stubs. There might be some lock rating issues, all those types of items. So there's usually a laundry list of things that have to be done. And once all those list of items are done, and then it's appropriate to remove the holding symbol and proceed forward. So then the property is eligible for a building permit. So the report again is in your package. The recommendation from the planner is that the request to remove the holding symbol by Brian and Mary Smith to allow for the construction of a single detached dwelling on each lot be granted, and that the implementing bylaws be passed. So the implementing bylaws are included in your package tonight as well, and they're to be considered by council at the tail end of this meeting. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
Any questions? Okay, so then we need to adjourn our public meeting. So if I can get a mover and a seconder to reconvene our council meeting. Councillor Regan and Councillor Westman. All opposed? That's carried. We are in our regular council meeting. So now I will ask for a mover and a seconder to essentially accept the planner's recommendation and resolve that the request to remove the H symbol be granted. Mover and seconder. Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Regan. All opposed? And that's carried. Okay, moving on to the minutes. And we've got 2 sets of minutes in front of us from February 16th and February 23rd. And if nothing has to be amended, then I would ask for a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes and approve them, excuse me, as circulated. Mover and seconder for that. Councillor Regan, seconder. Deputy Mayor Manders. All opposed, and that's carried. Business arising from the minutes. Everything that's on there is ongoing. I don't know if there was anything that council wanted to add from the previous minutes that we just approved or speak to. Okay, moving on to our correspondence. There is a number of items that have been received. There's only been one that has been highlighted by staff, and that is the notification that the early bird registration for AMO is open. And I believe the early bird rate is good until April 30th. So I know that Councillor Regan has indicated that he would like to attend. If anybody else is, you can let us know now, or you can let Tina know, and a motion can come forward and we can get those registered. Deputy Mayor, assuming you want to attend?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. And then if we can get those registrations in before April 30th. Don't know if there was any other items that council wanted to speak to. I did want to highlight number 2 and 3, and they are 2 thank you notes from residents, and Maggie had shared them with me when she received them, and they were both received on Fridays. So I think staff felt really good. They were nice thank you notes to get to kick weekends off, and it was certainly appreciated to get those notes to our staff, and certainly we thank our residents for taking the time to acknowledge that. Was there any other items that council wanted to speak to about in correspondence? Seeing none, then if I could get a mover and a seconder to accept the correspondence for information. Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan. All opposed? That's accepted. On to committee reports. You've got the minutes from the meeting that was just held on February 17th. Of course, those are draft minutes as they haven't been approved by the committee. Lisa, did you want to speak to that at all?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just that was our first meeting of 2021. So we kind of just welcomed everyone back together, and we had a good brainstorming session about some ideas for 2021 and how we can promote the community and maybe some new events, new way of doing events, and yeah, just kind of again how we can support our local businesses. That's kind of what we focused on the initial meeting. We're meeting later in March.
Okay, thank you. Blue water recycling.
We just had a short meeting. They've been testing the electronic eyes and on the sorting, and it's been going well, working out the bugs. Recycling product itself is rising, so that's good. It's at a level where it's break even or above, as opposed to a lot of years of well below that. So that was good news. And that's about it. I mean, right now it's about getting the new technology and electronic eyes and the sorting right now going on in the plant. So exciting project. So
great. Thank you. Lake Huron, we have a meeting on Thursday. Fire boards, you've got 2 sets of minutes in front of you. Again, these are draft for information. Ron, did you want to speak to them?
I can, Madam Mayor, thank you. So the first one on the list is the Lukenbrough Fire Department. You can see the date of the meeting was February the 11th. The first item was the fire chief's report. The call volume has been, touch wood, drastically reduced. It's dropped by about 50%, which is obviously good news. that that type of service. The second item was the chief has been asked to participate with 8 other fire chiefs across the province in a community risk assessment pilot program, which is quite timely in that we are required to update our community risk assessment this year as well. So we're going to be holding off until such time as he's done the training in that end, so we can hopefully, I guess, improve what we're doing on our end based on his training and knowledge. The inventory of existing and proposed 3-story or more residential buildings in the fire area has given the department staff and the chair to take a long, hard look at what we have in the line of equipment. And I think they are suggesting that it now is the right time to look at a possible ladder truck purchase. That's a very expensive piece of equipment. So they want to get out in front of this and give enough time for council to be able to consider that from a financial perspective. So they've sort of put that out on the table, and it was a very a very lengthy discussion. I think is a fair comment to make, because not only are we looking at a replacement of an expensive vehicle with regards to a ladder truck, the smallest ladder truck will not fit into the existing fire hall. So not only are you faced with the cost of an expensive ladder pumper combination truck, but you then have to either renovate where you are, or you have to look at a new fire hall. So they've done some investigation as to what those rough prices are, and I would caution that they're very rough estimates at this point, but we need to start, or they would like council to look at this and take a hard look at it, because it is a lot of money. And if we are going to move in that direction, time is of great importance here. So we need to look at that. So as a result of sort of that discussion, towards the end of the minutes, you'll see where we talk about a possible fire services master plan. So the motion was passed at the board, and it says resolved that the Lucan-Medall Fire Area Board recommend to council that they consider undertaking a fire services master plan with possible funding from the Development Charges Fund or efficiency money. So you'll notice in the Biddulph Blanchard Fire Board minutes, a similar resolution was passed at that meeting held a week later. So I think that's probably the biggest issue facing us in the next few years. Other than that, in the actual minutes, we are increasing the township levy towards the fire department by 5%. It is still a very, very economically run service, and we are very fortunate with both departments that our volunteer firefighters, the men and women, are certainly not in it for the money. Every time I get together with my fellow CAOs, they are very jealous of what we have. You'll see that the total cost for running the Lucan-Medall fire area is $171,000 for us. So that's a if you're looking at a full-time firefighter's wage in the city of London or city of Toronto, that's not more than one full-time firefighter. So and we have great equipment, we have a facility, and everything is run very, very well. So we are very fortunate in the services that we have and the cost of that service. So I don't know if anybody had any other questions arising from the Lucan-Biddulph Fire Board minutes. I'd be happy to take them.
Councillor Mastarakis.
Through you, Madam Mayor, when you talk about development charges, Ron, would ladder trucks be covered in any way as its growth, or is there anything else we can put towards this? Because it is due to growth and we're having apartment buildings. Is there anything that can be applied for towards that?
Well, sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, to answer the councillor's question. Absolutely, we're going to try and do everything we can. So the way that the development charges work is if you have an existing piece of equipment, the equivalent replacement is not eligible for development charges. But if you go with a larger piece of equipment, or in this case, a ladder truck, that's a service enhancement that we can plug back or point back to the reason for a larger piece of equipment is because of growth. Then that becomes eligible for development charges. Same thing with the fire hall. I don't know the square footage of the existing fire hall, but if we went to a larger fire hall, the square footage, the enlargement would be eligible for development charges.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Not on the Lucan side, no.
Okay, so if we move to the Biddulph Blanchard side, again, that meeting was held on a week later on February the 18th, and everybody was present, and both these meetings were virtually held as well. Again, we reviewed the list of accounts. We talked about the unaudited 2020 financial statement review. We talked about the status of the existing fire radios. Perth South, apparently the mayor of Perth South, Mr. Wilhelm, commented that the city of Stratford's system was not up to standards. So the county is looking at upgrading their radio system with an RFP. So the RFP, I believe, is out now. And
That's Perth County.
that's Perth County, correct? Perth County's radio system. Because again, the Biddulph Blanchard fire area covers the area of Perth South in Perth County, as well as our portion in Middlesex County. So our contribution, or the fire area board's contribution towards the new any new fire radio system, is expected to be in the $8,000 to $9,000 range. Again, the budget was increased by 5%, and we adopted the amended, or the 2021 draft budget. The increase in annual levies, this is where it gets interesting. The motion was passed that resolved that the Biddulph Blanchard Fire Area Board requests that municipal levies be increased at a rate of 10% per year instead of the current 5% per year beginning next year, and that is 2022. The reason for that is the board had a look at all the future capital expenditures in the capital forecast, and the cost of firefighting equipment, be it bunker gear, be it radios, be it the scuba air system, vehicles, everything is going up much more rapidly than the cost of inflation. So we are not putting enough away in the reserve account to write the check when it comes time to replace, be it a vehicle or some of these other items. The first and foremost, the largest ticket item that we're faced with is the replacement of the pumper, and that we can buy some time. It is 20 years old this year. So originally we had scheduled the pumper for replacement in 2021, but it's still in great shape, and we can extend that for a period of 5 years. We simply have to prove that it's still capable, and that we do that by what they call a pump test. So we can sort of buy, if you will, 5 extra years out of that piece of equipment before we have to get rid of it. But with the rate of contribution into the reserve account, there's not going to be enough money to write the check as we have in the past to replace that piece of equipment. So that's why the board passed that motion. So that becomes a budget consideration going forward, Madam Treasurer. And so again, I think they want to get out in front of this. We've got some years to prepare for it, but these are large ticket items that need to be addressed, and it's kind of a pay me now or pay me later kind of scenario. So going further through the report, we talked a little bit about the COVID-19 situation, and both departments are fairly happy with their department staffing levels. It hasn't really had an impact from COVID. There have been a couple of firefighters who have been off, but they've fully recovered. No lasting impact, so they're back on. And it doesn't show in the minutes here, but I was going to bring it up later, but it seems appropriate to bring it up now. Both fire departments were given the go-ahead to get their vaccines. So they have, there's been a number of firefighters from both departments that have already had their vaccine, and they will be getting their first shot of the vaccine over the next month or so. So that's good news as well. And again, the Biddulph Blanchard did pass the recommendation that council consider a fire services master plan. With the fact that this one is a joint fire board with Perth South, there is some talk, and there's been talk for a number of years, of Perth South's area within the fire board being expanded. They are very happy with the level of service being given to them from this fire service area. So they are looking to basically expand the area of Perth South that this department covers. So that is not an easy stroke of the pen to make that happen. There's quite a number of different issues that have to be dealt with, not the least of which is how do we pay for it? Right now, the split, Lucan Badolf pays 51%, Perth South pays 49% of the budget. If we were to cover more area in Perth South, does that change the formula somewhat? Knowing that the physical department is the physical fire hall is located within our community, and we are sort of the administering municipality. So the question is, how do we do that split? What area is involved? So it's not a simple process by any stretch. So I believe, Madam Mayor, you correct me if I'm wrong, but they were going to bring it back to their council and talk about. I think the first step has to be, well, how much area of Perth South are you looking for us to assume, and then figure out how we do that from there. Whether that's a change to the existing formula, and do we start monkeying with the 50-51-49 split, or the treasurer and I were talking a little bit earlier today. Is it might be simpler just to say, okay, you know what, we're gonna increase the area in Perth South by an extra 10%. Maybe it's just another, I don't know, just pick a number, $5,000 extra that they pay towards it, so we don't get into the weeds and get too complicated and upset the current agreement. So there's a number of different avenues and things that we can look at there.
And I think it's important that, like, I think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves in that, and I think this council has to have a discussion on a fire master plan, but Perth South has to do a fire master plan because essentially they buy their fire services from 3 different communities. So they need to look at how their fire service is being administered. So they would be doing one on their own. We have to talk about how it would look, you know, for our community. But what would come out of, we're assuming what comes out of the Perth South one would be to see, you know, how theirs is being divided up and is it working for their community and what the recommendation is. But that would come out of their fire service master plan, nothing that we would have anything to do with. So,
yes.
So I don't know, was that was pretty much it for the Granton one, I think.
Yes.
But I guess, so both fire boards have recommended a fire service master plan. And I guess my thoughts are I guess what would the next steps, because they both forwarded motions to our council. So how is that dealt with? Like the budget when I get, it'll sit there and then Catherine will deal with that when she's putting together her budget for next year. But with this fire service master plan, these 2 motions, how is it dealt with at our council level?
So through you, Madam Mayor, I would suggest the first step is it has to be a council discussion at this level, more or less to accept that recommendation and ask staff to, you know, investigate, number one, what the cost would be and the timeline and how that works. I've done a little bit of an investigation. The Township of Warwick, which is a very similar size municipality to ours, they did an RFP for a fire services master plan back in 2017, I believe. And I think it was I think they paid about $35,000 for it. It was quite lengthy. I did get a copy of it yesterday. I think I forwarded a copy to the mayor. There was 108 recommendations on there. So obviously I haven't had a chance to delve into that one too much. So that's maybe a little more than what we're looking for, but I have not had a chance to sort of digest what is actually in there. So I need staff needs a little bit of time to sort of figure out what that process is. But I guess at this point we would look to council. Is that something that I should be spending time on? Because if it's not on council's radar and they don't want to proceed, then I won't waste my time moving forward with that.
I don't know whether anybody from council has any comments at this point. It is something to consider whether you have background information to make that consideration, I'm not sure. I mean, obviously I sit on both fire boards, so I feel like I've got a little bit of background on it. I think it would be personally, I think it would be a worthwhile process to go through, especially when you look at the decisions that the Lucan department is having to face. And so I think as a municipality, we have to look at how are we going to deliver our fire services? What does that mean? And it could mean a number of different things. And that's a conversation that we've never had really. And does it warrant a third party looking at the service and trying to figure out how to best move forward with it as the community grows? Councillor Regan.
Thank you. I'm on the board, the Lucan board, and yeah, I actually agree with the mayor. It's something I think we should pursue and move forward. There are a lot of decisions, even based just on that last meeting. There's a lot of things that are coming up, and I think it's definitely worth it with the growth that we've had, and it's something that we should pursue. So I don't know if we need to make a motion to ask staff to proceed with that, or I'm just asking. Ron, sorry.
Madam Mayor, if I may answer that. I would suggest that if that's something that council wishes us to proceed forward with, we can prepare a motion, a proper motion for council to consider at the next meeting. And then hopefully I can get a little more background on it as well.
Sorry, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just actually, I would like, I'd like to see that. I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but that's something I think we should pursue for sure. Thank you.
Councillor Mastarakis.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I agree. I just would like a little more information. Just heard this tonight, so kind of, so that works out well for the next council meeting. I would support that direction. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And okay, so I think that's it for the fire boards. Unless anybody else had any questions on the draft minutes in front of you. Okay, then moving on, ABCA and Upper Thames. Councillor Westman.
Yeah, so our meetings are later in the month, but there are some things that are going on with spring gladly and happily approaching. We're going to have double-digit warm temperatures in the next couple of weeks. So that means there's going to be a lot of snow melt. So snow melt means water. Water means raising rivers and streams, drainage ditches. And so, you know, putting out a safety caution to people to be extra careful around rivers, streams, and drainage ditches. The ice is also softening with the warm temperatures. We're going to be seeing ice on rivers and ponds and lakes and what have you, softening and getting thinner. So people need to be extra cautious. I drove by the Wildwood Conservation Area last week and noticed that there were people out on the ice fishing. And while it's probably safe now, it probably won't be in the next week or two. So I'm hoping that people get the hint and understand that spring is sprung. It's on its way here, and people need to be really careful around that. Other than that, I mean, we're moving forward with the 2021 projects and operations. We're hopeful with COVID kind of, you know, looking like there's light at the end of the tunnel, that we're going to be able to continue to operate programs over the summer in maybe a modified look. It'll be a little different, maybe like what we did last summer for Upper Thames River and for the Asaba Bayfield facilities. So one thing that I did read some articles, and we talk about species at risk and some of the things that we're doing to protect the ecosystems in our watersheds, and continue to be impressed with the work they do with protecting turtle species in our areas. Both the Upper Thames and the Asaba Bayfield do amazing work at protecting species at risk. And I'm not sure if everybody knows how this works, but the hatch rate and maturity rate for turtles is very low. They may lay 100 eggs or 150 eggs per female, and only 1 or 2 of those eggs will actually grow to adult turtles. And so what we do is with the Sable Bayfield, we take those eggs where we can find them. We have skilled staff that know what to look for, and they bring them back to an incubator area. They hatch them, and that survival rate goes from a couple out of 100 to 30 or 40 out of 100. So that's helping the ecosystem all across the watershed to be healthier. So little things like that. I just thought I'd throw a little of that out for people to know. So
Great. Thanks, Alex. I meant to mention in correspondence, there was a letter that we received from Upper Thames with regards to the cover crop research work that they do with the Upper Medway watershed. And it's a link to their blog. And of course, we know that there's a lot of work that they do with cover crops and erosion and all of the special projects that they've got in Luke and Biddulph. And so that might be of interest to anybody that's watched that might want to read that. I forgot to mention that in the correspondence. Parks and Recreation, Paul.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. We are meeting tomorrow evening at 6 p.m.
Okay.
We'll have an update for you after.
Great, thank you. Staff reports, Ron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple updates, verbal updates here. We had our first case management conference meeting last Friday for the LPAT, which is the planning appeal on the Verhoog 5-story apartment building. That was, like I said, held last Friday. They did schedule a 2-day hearing, and that is scheduled for June 24th and June 25th upcoming. The second round of modernization money is being applied for on the part of the county. The county is looking at 3 particular areas that I guess best enhance all the lower tiers. And that is with regards to asset management. The second one is a development planning application software. And the third one is payroll. So those are the 3 primary projects that they're going to be trying to do on a countywide basis that would benefit all the lower tiers. This Friday, Southwest Middlesex has arranged for a meeting with the mayors and deputy mayors with MPP Monty McNaughton and MPP Jeff Urick. And the hope is that we're going to try and have a fairly frank conversation with them as to what the needs and wants are for all the lower tier municipalities in the county. And I think the ultimate goal is that we hope we can convince them that the province should expand their existing green stream program. So we'll be talking about the need to expand our sewage treatment plant, the ultimate need for additional things like we're still hoping obviously for phase 2 funding. So that's another big project. We've got a lot of growth going on, so that results in lots of road projects and things like that. So we are trying to get them to recognize that it's not all going to be able to be funded through development charges. For example, the existing sewage treatment plant, it is approaching 30 years of age. I think it's 30 years actually the end of this year. So we are getting to the point where we not only need to expand the plant, but we need to renovate and update the existing plant. Things don't last forever. They need to be updated, and all those updates cost money. The official plan update, we have a senior staff meeting on plan for March the 12th, and that's to review the final draft from Stuart Finlater in the county, and hopefully we'll figure out fine tune it so that it's ready for council. And we also want to discuss, or the county wants to discuss, what we can do with regards to public engagement and what are the, what sort of process can we go through? Can we do virtual one-on-one meetings? Do we send it out to everyone and anyone who wants a meeting? We can arrange for a virtual meeting with the planner to address any individual concerns. And then the community safety and well-being plan. Everybody may recall that Jennifer Kirkham was made a presentation to council. I believe that was a couple months ago. And that plan is required to be adopted by council prior to July 1st. And I'm happy to report that we are on track to meet that deadline. And I believe that is it, because we already talked about the fire departments have begun the process of getting vaccinated for COVID-19. So that's all I had, Madam Mayor.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Ron at this time? Okay, Tina, do you have anything?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Great. Any questions for Tina? Finance. Like you didn't have enough to do, Catherine. Now you've got a couple reports too.
Well, yeah, thank you. A couple have to, this is the time they have to be presented. So should be really quick though. The first one, this is just an information report and it's required under the Municipal Act. It's the 2020 Statement of Remuneration and Expenses for the council. And it's the details are listed in the attachment there, and note that they're not audited, but most likely final. So that's just for information and to require under the Municipal Act. And do you want me to go to the next one, or do you want to ask questions on that one?
Yeah, I guess I'll just say, is there any questions on the statement that's presented? Okay, we just need a verbal motion to receive that for information. If I can get a mover and a seconder. Councillor Regan and Councillor Mastarakis. All opposed, and that's carried. Okay.
So the second report is regards to our modernization fund allocation. So 2 years ago, we received an unconditional grant of roughly $453,000 in which to improve surfaces and other projects that the township deems important. And we spent a little bit in 2019 and in 2020. And then recently, another intake of modernization funding was announced, and Ron just mentioned those projects. So that we're going to join in with the county to, they're going to submit a joint project along with all the lower tiers, and those were the 3 projects that Ron had mentioned. But the one stipulation, according to be involved with those applications, is that we have to show how we have allocated those other funds that we received 2 years ago. So that's what this report is about, and it has to be done in front of council before March 15th, because that's the deadline to apply for this other funding. So you can see in the attachment, we've in the past week talked about how best to spend or allocate the funds, and that's listed there. A lot of them we already talked about and will come up within the 2021 budget and those kinds of things. And then we looked at how we could use the funds in future years. It doesn't mean like for next year, it could be in the next 3-4 years or what have you. And the other thing to note is that if they're not successful with the application this round for those other projects, we can have another look at this and use the funds in a different way if we need to. So that's what we have. That's what we need to do. So all those funds are spent there. You can notice that we did put a number in there for the fire services master plan. A best guess at this point. We did work with the IT at the county to get some numbers for some of the other projects as well to put on here, and how we would share that funding. We'd have to, for those projects that were mentioned, if they're approved, then we would be responsible for about 35% of that cost of those projects. And we tried to reflect that in these numbers as well. That's all I really have to mention about that one. So
any questions for Catherine on that? Okay. And there is a motion later on that we can approve, that would be attached to, I believe it has to be attached. The resolution has to come from council and go in with the application for the second round. I believe that's how that works. So we can deal with that motion at the end of the meeting. Anything else, Catherine?
That's all I have at this time. Thank you.
Any questions for Catherine? Okay, no planning, public works, Jeff.
Madam Mayor, I'll start off with two reports that are repetitive reports that come back each year. The first one is our gravel tender results have come back. We got good pricing. I feel confident with that. My recommendation is that we go with low tender. I don't have any issues with that, and it's a local company. Clarence Carter and Sons did provide the lowest bid this year. So at 11.15 per ton, that's a good price, and I would recommend that we accept that tender.
Any questions on that one? There is a motion for later on, so we can move on. Jeff?
Okay, just bear with me for a second. The next one is the dust tender, control tender, and again, the recommendation is to go with low tender. It's Denmark Brines. They did win our tender last year. Everything went well last year, so I don't see any reason why we wouldn't accept it. The only thing I'd like to point out is in the report, it talks about our 2000 pricing was 64,000. We actually used less than that. So even though the tender came back in at 67, and we only have 62 budgeted, I'm comfortable we're going to be close to the 62 rather than the 67, just because we tend to bid a little bit higher because we don't know what the year is going to bring. If it ends up being a dry year, we may end up using a little more product, and we want to make sure that we have that in our tender. So but that's the reason why those numbers are out a little bit there. So but the recommendation is to go with low tender.
Any questions for Jeff on this one? I guess I just have one, in that your high bidder was the high bidder was almost twice as much. And I guess my question would be, why would that be? Why would there be such a discrepancy? Is it a different product, or?
Madam Mayor, that's again, very good question. Daily is actually, so we call calcium. We use calcium as our benchmark chemical to keep dust control down. It's through the years, it's always been kind of the benchmark. Well, it's come to the ability that there's composite products that the provincial standards have okayed through testing, and so the other three companies actually use composites products that are equivalents. So Daily actually provides the true calcium product, and so it tends to be a little bit higher. The other ones are a little bit lower, but they have to provide more product. So to be realistic, just to give an example, for every truck that shows up for a Daily, 2 trucks have to show up for the other ones, which to make up the difference in the product. Where this comes in is if you are supplying dust control to North Bay, Daily ends up becoming an extremely more competitive product, because you can get that product there with the trucking cost down, whereas Denmark is coming out of it'll be coming out of block. But anyways, it comes out near Sarnia, just south of Sarnia, so it's real quick for us to get. So their product ends up being more competitive the closer we are to it. So, but yeah, it is a different product, but they're still fall under the Ontario specs and in equivalent. So, but that is a good question.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, moving on.
Okay, the next one, my next report, and this one, the next report is my Granton wastewater treatment plant report. We did have We did have a failure in the fins at the wastewater treatment plant, and I provided a picture in the report because I think a pictures are worth 1,000 words here, and you'll see the line of that the circles there, and they're in sections, and those fins that are in those sections are like a composite. They're like a fiber mesh filtration system, and that's actually what the bacteria lives on in the system. So as the effluent or the water comes through those filters, it meets the bacteria, and the different bacteria is going down the system help clean the water. And I think that's one of the big things is we've got to understand that in these systems, bacteria actually does the cleaning of the water. So in those systems, and I think everybody's had a tour of the plant. We've had one of those sections fail. Actually, the fiberboard has come loose, and it has come out of its holding and is rattling around when it turns. So what we're talking about replacing is just the first section. So it's not the whole section. If you look at that picture, there's probably 6 different sections there. At the plant in Granton, we're only replacing the first section. I believe there's 4 sections in Granton. We're only replacing the first one there. In the last, I talk about that there's been these repairs before. The last time it was repaired, it was the other section. It was the section at the end, and this one is actually in the section at where it comes in. Just to give a little bit of, this will be a repeating repair. When the fins start to wear and start to stress, they'll fail and let go of where they're bolted on, and they'll start to rattle around in the sections and need to be replaced. So that's the way the RBC theater, the RBC system works. And it's just a repair part of this. So Aqua has received a quote. It is from Hanna Environmental Equipment. They're the ones that seem to be the experts in this. They were the ones that were here last time to replace the last section. They're recommended to replace. So their quote to repair what's there was just under 53 or just under $50,000 to repair, but I want them to do an inspection on the other sections while they're there. So that was going to be another $3,000, and I think it's good money spent that we find out what the other sections are there. So it basically comes up to about $53,000 to do the repair and do the inspection on the other sections that are there. Aqua has been trying and get another quote for us, but at this point, I don't have one, and I think we have to move forward because as these sections rattle around, as this machine turns, it's banging and crashing, and eventually it's going to keep taking more and more sections out. So I recommend that we move forward, and Hanna is the preferred pick. So I bring it forward to council that I need some direction to move forward with that.
Questions for Jeff on this one? Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. Jeff, I'm just wondering about the frequency of the breakdown, because it mentioned this is like the 5th time, I think you said it's broken down, but they're different sections. So is this happening like the frequency? And I'm just wondering, second to that, do we get like a warranty on this because, or to cover the costs, or is that the way this works?
In through the mayor, in this type of repair, it's a stress type repair. Or a stress type problem. So it's not like this section failed like a year, like it's not like it was new a year ago. So as we repair different sections, the warranty just won't be there. And it's a stress repair. So, the more, as we put stuff through this plant, as capacities go up, it'll put more stress on the system. So no, I don't, there's, if it was within a little bit and there was a reason why the repair failed other than the failure of the fins, yes, that's acceptable. But because of the fin failure, it's not, that we can't get a warranty on that sort of thing. As for the frequency, it's based on a number of years of use as it goes through. And like I mentioned, we've had 5, this will be our 5th repair that I've been told about. The first time was a complete repair, and was a warranty due to something when they built the plant. But after that, the last 4 have been stress related, and we're only replacing the ones we need. And there's no need to replace them all. It doesn't give us any benefit to replace them all. If the next section lasts another year or another 3 years, we get the use out of that. So yeah, I don't see us. I think it's more of realizing that this is just an ongoing repair that the Granton system has to take in account for. And as we move forward and we look at costs, this is part of that cost of running that system. So that's my main reason of making sure everybody's aware that this just isn't a one-off. This is a repetitive repair that's going to come through.
Okay. Let's go have a follow-up, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Jeff. So does the plant have to get shut down? Like, will residents be disadvantaged, or do we just shut the plant down for a couple of days, or how does that work?
No, and through the mayor, no, we'll have a system in place that the village will continue to operate. We wouldn't go there. Last resort, we can have a sucker truck come in and transport material down to Lucan if we had to. So no, right. No, the inconvenience of that won't affect the residents.
All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Jeff.
Councillor Westman.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Jeff, for the report on that. Yeah, I mean, that plant is, what is it, 24 years old or something like that now. And it's, it's held together remarkably well considering what it is. It's not an ideal system, but it certainly, it does its work. And I'm familiar with the biodisc system and how it works. So those things, they do have a shelf life. They only last so long before, under load, they're going to wear out. One thing that I was going to ask you before, has there been any kind of a noticeable reduction in fats, oils, and grease going through the system? Have you got any numbers on that, or?
Through the mayor, that's a interesting. I did talk to Renee about that because of when we were overlooking at this, because it is the first section that you come into the building, and that was one of the ones Rod and we had talked about the buildup of greases on causing more weight on the fins from one of the things they've introduced in Granton has been a chemical to help settle the greases out of the water before it actually builds up on the fins themselves. They're trying to lessen that. So Renee was not able to give an exact indication that there's less greases because they're controlling them better as they come into the plant. So I can't really give you a yes or no on that. I would hope with our education that there's less, but at the same time, we're trying to make the plant work more efficiently with some other options there. So,
any other questions for Jeff on this? I guess the next question coming out of this, and Alex, he brought up in his comments the age of the plant. How long would a plant like this it should work? What sort of life expectancy can we expect out of a plant like this? And at some point, would the question before council have to be a replacement for it?
Madam Mayor, the plant is, the good news is the plant's a very simplistic plant. There is some control panels and there's computers, and don't get me wrong, but the system itself is fairly straightforward. we can rebuild that plant very easily. So I don't see an issue in the near future of like, oh God, we're gonna have to replace the whole thing. It certainly is not complicated. The only thing I would stress is that there is a large shaft that all the fins run on. If we ever lose that shaft, if we ever have that shaft fail, that's when and Renee has we talked about the same thing. It's easy to get the fins, and as long as that shaft's turning, we can still operate. If we lose that shaft, we're going to go down. So we're looking at some point whether there should be some proactive maintenance or having some parts on the shelf, such as bearings for the big shaft, so that if we did have a failure, we would not be down for, oh God forbid, a week or 2 weeks out there. So, but the system itself is actually fairly straightforward. So I don't, everything has to be replaced, but I don't see anything in the future that says, yeah, we got to replace it in the next 20 years. So that's the good news. The biggest thing we're going to have to look at, and I know one of the things I've talked about, and I haven't brought it forward to council, is do a cost comparison of what are our costs of running that plant out there compared to other options that might be available out there, and as going forward with it. So, but right now this is part of it, and it's operating like it should. So we'll go from there.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Jeff on that? Okay, number 4.
Oh, and the last one is, and I think Catherine might be kind of excited about this one. So we were approached, Ron and I were approached. There's a company would like to install fiber optic. They have a contract for St. Pat's school, and they won the right to do that, to service that school. So they want to be able to set up in our road allowance to put some infrastructure in that. And having said that, with the houses on Nagle, they've asked to also include those houses along Nagle to allow fiber to be installed there. So basically, we just have to set up a municipal access agreement with them, and we've reviewed it with our lawyers and their lawyers. So it's just a matter of getting council's approval now to move forward with that. So.
Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. Anything else, Jeff?
No, I'd just like to say we did the OGRA's Good Roads. I actually was extremely impressed with it. I thought the speakers were all good. I wasn't surprised by 2 things: climate change and green energy, or green infrastructure, and Vision Zero, as in traffic calming, are the big things right now. And it was, but I really was. I enjoyed it, and I got something out of every presentation. So I thought it was great. So, and then the other thing I just wanted to let council know is that BM Ross, we had a meeting with BM Ross on the master servicing study. They basically have pulled everything together, and we're meeting on March the 18th, and they're supposed to have kind of a draft procedure or draft report, so we can start reviewing actually content. And so I see the light at the end of the tunnel is coming up real quick. So that's great news. That'll be coming up in the next little while. So.
Any questions for Jeff on what he's reported on? Deputy Mayor Manders.
Sorry, not on what he's reported on Public Works.
Okay, no, that's fine. Yep, sorry. Yep, go ahead.
Just sidewalks. A few questions on that. How is it determined when they are unlevel and need to be grinded down? When is it determined? So how, when, and then when is it fixed? That's kind of, how is it determined? How do we determine the areas that need to be fixed? That's my first question. Or shaved.
So
repair.
Through the mayor, so there is minimum maintenance standards. So we have a lip, a crack size that we actually can live with and we can't live with. We have to do an inspection every year. We have to, once we're aware of the problems, if we find a problem, then we're supposed to fix it. Whether it's putting in coal mix to fill up or grind down or just what, but we're supposed to fix it within the time frame that's given. But once we do that inspection, we're on the hook of fixing that. So we are, as a municipality, we are in the process of getting, and it's just coming through. I was hoping to have word on it, but as a working group in the county, we're going to be inspecting our roads and our sidewalks. So Lucan Badolf has actually had all their sidewalks inspected. I'm just waiting for the release of that information, and we'll be able to come back with where all our problem spots are. And part of that is not only do we have to look at the cracks and the crevices and the lips and the tripping hazards, but we also have to look at the accessibility of them. So in the case of, if you walk down Alice Street, you'll see how narrow the sidewalks are. And it's just, that's one of the bigger issues too, is the width of the sidewalks as well.
Yeah. Comments on the trip has been at a higher level for me in my 11, 12 years doing this. And I just think a lot has to do with COVID and people staying home and snowbirds not going a lot more walkers. So it'll be good to get that obviously fixed, and as soon as we can, just because again, I think our volume of walkers is higher, like any community right now, than it ever has due to the fact that most people are staying home. So, all right. Thank you.
Yeah. So, and just one more comment before I go, Madam Mayor, is that I will bring a report to council. They'll see the report on our trip hazards and our cracks and our crevices and our accessibility on our sidewalk. So we'll get, I'll let everybody see that information, and as we put it in our asset management plan, we'll have to put a plan together to try and correct it as best we can. Obviously, we can't rip everything out and put everything in brand new, but we certainly can grind and fill up and make as safe as possible. So,
okay, thanks, Jeff. Any other questions for Jeff at this time? Okay, I would echo it, and I'm sure Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan will, in their councillors' comments, make comment, but I would echo what you said about OGRA. I was extremely impressed with it. I thought they did a great job on a virtual platform, and you hit the hot topics, that's for sure. Climate change, Vision Zero. My goodness, how many sessions were there on Vision Zero? But I thought the speakers were great. I thought it was really good. Couple days, so it was good. Okay, Parks and Rec. Paul.
Through you, Madam Mayor. The first item that I wanted to bring to attention, I sent an email out to council earlier today. We had a last minute request of council, well, of the township. The community story walks that we had earlier in the spring, summer, to kind of through early on to have active outdoor activities. They were very well received in our community. I believe Mayor Cathy had brought a report from the county on that, about how they were looking to do a more permanent idea, and they were looking to it. They would like to apply through the Canada Healthy Community Initiative to support this project, and they're looking for us to provide a letter of support that we would be willing to participate with them and provide this in our community, as they want to develop a list of communities looking to participate, so they can determine scope of their project for submitting. Of course, with a lot of these requests that have seemed to be coming in lately, it's a very short deadline. They need to know by Tuesday, March the 9th. So that's why I felt it was important to bring it forward now, especially as it was so well received in our community. And it had been discussed previously that this would be something that Parks and Rec staff would be huge support for, as it was so well received, especially with COVID-19, people being at home. It's the more and more amenities that we can add outdoors for people to enjoy our community, the better. An important part of the conversation that I would bring forward to them as well is that if we do one in Lucan, we must also do one in Granton, as you know, especially the kids. They can't drive. They're not going to ride their bikes to Lucan. We want to make sure that our whole community is addressed that way.
Okay, questions or comments on that? I will confirm what Paul said at the library level when early on gave the report on the story walks. They were in the walks in Granton and Lucan were the best received across the county. So it certainly would be something that I think our families would enjoy. Any comments or questions on that for Paul? And I would probably ask just for a verbal motion to endorse the letter of support. Councillor Westman, and seconder, Councillor Regan. All opposed? That's carried. Okay.
And then other than that, just a quick update for council. You know, I think we're back into the orange level of restrict, and we, you know, we're working really hard, Abby and myself, to coordinate gym rentals, return to pickleball, volleyball, all within the guidelines. So, you know, the communities, they're anxious to come back into our community center. So we're working as hard as we can to get them all back in here. And our seniors exercise has started back up, which is a great initiative for our community. You know, though that group really takes a huge advantage of that program. It's a good social program for them as well. So we're also looking at new ways that we can build upon that again now that we're back open.
Great. Questions for Paul, Parks and Rec? Okay. Moving on to councillors' comments. Any councillor comments? Councillor Westman.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, just add to Jeff's report on the Good Roads Conference. There was so much amazing stuff. I mean, but a few things stuck in my head because, you know, talking about climate change, and as we go forward planning different projects and, you know, whether it be bridge repairs or road work or whatever, there was, I guess, a kind of a thing that they brought forward, like the shovel ready projects that we have, and there's shovel worthy projects and then shovel smart projects. So that kind of stuck in my head. It was a kind of a neat idea to think about when you're planning for those type of works, that we keep climate change in mind. One thing that kind of has been sitting in my mind since they mentioned it was as we go forward and climate change becomes much more of an impact on the world around us, the number of high temperature days during the summer is looking to increase. Now they suggest that there's 8 or 9 days per summer where the temperatures are over 30 degrees Celsius. That number could change significantly over the next decade or two. And we kind of, you know, what do we do to prepare for that? Well, I don't know. That's for smarter people than me to come up with, but it's kind of alarming to think of that. And also on the flip side of that, our winter storm events could become much bigger and meaner too. So it's one of those things for community planning going forward. Maybe we keep that in mind, that climate change is going to have a major impact on everything we do going forward. So we, you know, should add that idea to our planning. So, but again, I'll reiterate, it was an amazing, considering they had to retool the entire conference format to the virtual one. They did a really good job. I was quite impressed. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I was also there, got to talk to Jeff and Councillor Westman quite a bit. A lot of good discussions. So some of the things that I noticed, and of course, thanks to council for letting me go. The first thing was just how everything's going to go electric cars. And it really surprised me, some of the things, the Ford Motor Company, for example, I think they talked about switching over by 2030 which is very, very quick. So those very short timeframes where we're going to be going to electric, and it looked to be like it's almost like 20, I think, correct if I'm wrong, say 2045 or 2050, that there's no more gas powered cars. I guess it's a thing of the past is what they're talking about. A couple of other things they talked about that I thought were important was the fact that a lot of people are moving from the urban areas to the rural areas, and the increased traffic flow and the use of our highways and making sure that they're in a better condition. They talked about snow removal, the use of sand and salt, and how all that's going to increase because people are now living, they're moving out of London, they're moving from Toronto. There's a whole big discussion they had one of the seminars, big discussion about how all of these people are moving out of Toronto and moving to Kitchener and then moving to Woodstock and then finally moving to London. And so they're pushing out that way, and talked a little bit about the increase in homes and that sort of thing. The other thing too that I thought was important that I thought would be really relevant for some of our discussions was how about redesigning subdivisions and making the roads sort of a less, we see some of the plans that I've seen, and we've had discussions about, we've had the straightaways, like Gilmore, for example, it's like a straightaway. And I know I've brought that up a number of times at council, as others have, but talking a little bit about being more aware of the types of roads and the road systems that you have in subdivisions, and designing of subdivisions too, is what they were talking about. So again, it was very good. I thought all the presenters were amazing. They had a lot of very high level politicians, and there was actually some very, like I said, some very good speeches, and I learned quite a bit. So I got a lot out of it. So thank you. Appreciate it. I'll go again next year if I can. Okay, thanks.
The seminar that you mentioned about how people are moving and they're moving to where they can afford, there was a Lucan Biddulph shout out because the economist who presented at that is actually a Wayland's Corners boy. So he quite often will invoke Wayland's Corners or Lucan Biddulph. So he gave us a shout out in his, from a growing community standpoint. He spoke about how the days when, nobody thought that Lucan Biddulph would be a growing community, and here they are. So that was fun to hear that. Any other councillor comments? Councillor Mastarakis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Two items from a resident regarding procurement because of what was in the paper recently with the City of London about procurement, Davies trees. How do we ensure, or what are our processes, if you can remind the residents of maybe longer term contracts when we RFP to give some comfort around our processes and procedures in Lucan Biddulph?
Okay. Who wants to take that one on? When do we procure? Ron?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So we have a procurement bylaw, and we also have a purchasing policy that and there's certain levels in their dollar amounts, and I don't have it right in front of me, but there are certain dollar amounts within those policies. So at the end of the day, it's about getting value for our taxpayers' dollar, and that's ultimately how every department head looks at this. And like I said, that there's certain dollar amounts where you're required to, and even under those dollar limits, I like to think we all, as department heads, act as if this is our own money. If we were doing this at our house, how would we do it? So if even if we're not required to get three estimates, if we can get 3 estimates, we're going to get 3 estimates, because if we do get a question, how do we answer that if we don't have a comparable? Now, in all cases, such as the Hannah repair that needs to be done at the Granton sewage treatment plant, we're not always able to get quotes. Sometimes it's very specialized. So there are exceptions to every rule, but certainly we've operated in this manner for quite some time, and I like to think we get good value for our dollar. Absolutely. So I don't know whether that answers your question, but there is a policy and a bylaw that we have to follow. So.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have anything else, Councillor Mastarakis?
Right, in the appointment bylaw, I had a question about the committee appointment. Now, So, and I've had this from residents too, where they don't know sometimes what the function of the committee is. Here's ABC committee. What does it do? What's the committee's role on what decisions they make, and what decisions does council make from that? So kind of some clarification. These are committees of council, so they're kind of like I see them like our special teams. So you've got the punt return team. So what is that team required to do, and what are the players do you want on that team, and what decisions do they get to make on the field? So that's the first part. And then how is the selection of the committee members made for those committees? So kind of a process or terms of reference in essence, and then what's the decision process around how the committee members are appointed to those committees. I've had some people in the community recently say, hey, I want to volunteer. I'm looking for opportunities. If we could post some of this information, say, hey, here's what we're looking for, and here's how you apply, and process, having processes documented and in place leads to greater transparency in the community, of course. Here's the process, here's how we run it. It's clear and easy to follow. So terms of reference, what are your thoughts around terms of reference, and then committee appointment policies?
Ron?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the terms of reference, we don't typically have terms of reference for things like blue water recycling. Those are appointees to a board or things like that, right? So when you look at a strict committee, there's really not too many of them. I'm just going through the one right now. The emergency control group, that one is quite prescriptive. I mean, the mayor and deputy mayor, and then all the other partners are prescribed. The Lucan Biddulph Community Economic Development Committee, maybe Lisa, if she's still on there, she can answer that one. That one, it really evolved, I think, from what started out, I think, with the Bacon Fest committee, was it not, Lisa? And then it sort of spun off.
No.
I'm trying to remember. I'm not involved in that one, so I can't really speak to that one too much.
We started that one probably 16, 17 years ago as an economic development committee. Perry Cascanet was the lead of that committee at first, and then it's kind of evolved since then. We'd love to get committee people to come on the committee. Love more people if they would come.
So, for example, the Lucan Santa Claus Parade Committee, that's really just obviously they organize the Santa Claus Parade. They're listed on here as a committee because they need protection, liability protection, and that is afforded by being appointed as a committee of council. So then the Parks and Recreation Committee, I believe when Jason Boyer created that one, there are terms of reference for that one. Is that not correct, Paul? And Councillor Regan, I believe you're on it as well. And then, get the right one here. And then the Finance Committee, we just talked about the Finance Committee. So that one is tasked with assisting staff in the development of budget and the sort of monitoring of accounts on a go-forward basis.
So if, other than the video today, if I was a resident, I want to know what the committees did, where would I go to? Is that something we want to do, is post the information on the website? Here's the committees, here's what they do. Just so there's an understanding of the.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I don't know that I would do that. I would just encourage whoever you're speaking with, if they're interested, absolutely. Like Lisa said, we're always happy to accept volunteers. Give us a call. We're happy to show them what's available. But I do, and Madam Mayor, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but do we not at the start of every term of council sort of advertise for the public members for both fire boards as well?
Yeah, because that's, I believe that is an application process, and that's always advertised. The Parks and Rec, I believe that there's an advertising because I think that and I'm looking to Paul to refresh me again, but I think that came out of the master plan. And so again, it's prescribed as to, I think, the number of member, or like the number of people that you have, so that if, you know, so-and-so steps aside, then there is a public process to fill that vacancy. The Community Economic Development Committee, there's always been a constant call for people. And I think over the years, there's been various different things that the committee, as it has changed in its formation over the years, as what they've done to try and engage members, whether it is business owners, whether it's just engaged community members, but they've done everything from a volunteer fair to, you know, knocking on doors to the businesses. They're always engaging, and there is no prescription as far as I know. And again, I'm looking to staff as to how many people can be on that. And so, yeah, if you know people, like the CEDC would take them, absolutely, you know.
Okay, thank you all for your comments.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
Just further to Peter's point, it is interesting. Sometimes these committees, like whether it be Bacon Pass or I sat on the CDC Economic Development Committee, and it does seem like you reach out almost to your 4 or 5 people within your circle. And how do we get it, you know, with the community growing and bigger? I think that's what Mr. Matter is saying. Like how, you know, and I struggle with that. I struggle with that with the seniors, and we hear Sheila talk about wanting people to volunteer with the Heritage Group and all this. And I think all of us as counselors is with, you know, it's how do we find out outside our group of 5 people that we talk to, how do we know the best way to communicate with them? I mean, we seem to be doing a much better job on Facebook and on, you know, the community news, but it's such a growing community. To me, as everybody that's on this video, how do we get it outside of the group of people we know? And I don't know what the answer is, but I think that's kind of too what you're saying. We got to work at that. Maybe not, but I agree. You know, it's a continuing better improvement, because I think we've done really well going with Facebook and doing different things compared to when I first started on council. So it's just yeah. So it's.
I think that Lisa could maybe talk. I guess will probably be 2 years ago, since last year was a year of no events. But I think maybe about 2 years ago, somebody, and you'll have to remind me whether the library or whether, was it Abby at the arena? There was a volunteer fair in the senior center. And it was for not just municipal organizations, but kind of all the organizations in the community. So Guides was there, and we need leaders. This is who we are. And I see Paul's hands up, so I know he's got something to say. But I think the idea was that somehow that fair would run on a more regular basis, but then of course we weren't allowed. So Paul.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Absolutely, that was the intent, and COVID-19 happened and very much sidelined that. I know we had feedback from the first event, that wasn't as well attended, and that once again, that's that same problem. How do we get that information out there? I know there was there's some misunderstanding about what the event was, whether it was for volunteers or whether it was for organizations, and really it was for both. So I think that's something to look at. It's the same issue. You know, how do you get to the people that don't have Facebook? How do you get? So I mean, if it becomes more of a planned schedule thing, maybe that's something we put in the community guide, and it becomes a more regular thing, and people get more familiar with it. For sure.
I mean, the community guide is there. It does list all of the service clubs. It lists, your faith-based organizations. Your scouts and your guides and all of that. And so, obviously when we had the community guide, obviously it didn't happen in the spring or the winter for obvious reasons. But that's another resource where people can turn to find out where they can volunteer, you know, in the community. But that's, I think, I mean, we can talk all we want, but I think that is the challenge of every organization, whether it's a municipal committee or whether it's a community group, is getting the volunteers and, you know, getting people out there. Paul.
Thank you, through Madam Mayor. If I may, just one more comment on that. I know when I last attended the Parks and Recreation Ontario conference, one of the conversations was that, you know, volunteerism is very difficult with the modern generation because the cost of living, the cost of everything has gone up. So people have 2-3 jobs. They you know, they don't have time for their families, well, because they're working so much. So they don't have as much free time. And you know, people aren't as willing to come out and volunteer anymore. And that's a real big hurdle that I think we all have to get over and find a new way.
Yeah. Anything else, Councillor Mastarakis? Okay. Any other councillor comments? Deputy Mayor.
No, I wanted to just talk briefly about an article that I read that reflected kind of on our on the dog tag policy. It was from Woodstock, and they're doing away with their tag policy in 2022. And it really made me reflect on our, you know, on our purpose and what it meant when it first started. Theirs was 1976, and what the purpose is today. And it again, a great article. And I really, you know, I look at our last year as council, and we discussed service animals, we discussed cats. It seems like we now have you know, we've had a great answer when it comes to dogs. If dogs are loose and stray, they get a call. We can call somebody, they pick them up, they take them to the kennel, and the owner that created that expense is actually paying for it. And it just, you know, when you read the article, it does just appear to be a tax grab. It seems like it's I don't know. I really, you know, what is the effectiveness of it? What is its purpose? And you know, it led me to, I want to have staff look into, you know, the feasibility of continuing doing the dog policy, or us doing away with it, is what I'd like to see done, or not, or just, you know, have a better understanding of that.
So what I might suggest, because I'm gathering, so you kind of want to look at animal control and what that means to the community. And
well, the feasibility of ongoing with the dog tags, yeah, collecting for the dog tags, yeah.
That probably, and I'll look to our clerking people, but that probably should be done through a notice of motion, I would think, to direct staff for a report like that, outside the realm of what they would normally report on.
Okay, I'll do that. And I email that to staff after making the notice of motion?
So you make the notice of motion, and depending on when you make it, then at the next meeting, the motion would be made, you'd get a seconder, it would be discussed, and then either one, staff is directed, or staff is not directed.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, any other councillor comments? As I mentioned in my opening remarks, if you know anybody in London or Middlesex that is 80 or over, they are eligible for a vaccine, and they can phone, or you can access the appointments through the website. They're booking them in 2-week increments, but I would highly recommend that, as I say, if you know somebody, make sure they get vaccinated. Okay, moving on then. No changes to budget. Notices of motion. Deputy Mayor.
You know, I'm going to make that notice of motion. I'm going to ask staff to prepare a report to the ongoing feasibility of selling dog tags in our community. So I'll make that notice of motion. And the only thing I need clarity on, do I email what I just said to staff, or is just verbally saying that's good enough? This is my first time doing it.
I believe, Ron? It has to be written.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, just to clarify the actual wording that you want. And once you email that to me, then we can, if we need to fine tune it or whatever, we can fine tune it. And then that'll be included in the package for the next meeting, which would be, let me look at the calendar, March 16th.
So I will, I'll type out what I just said and send it to you. Okay,
Yes, please.
thank you. That's my notice of motion. Thank you.
Just writing that down.
Oh.
Okay, any other notices of motion? Councillor Mastarakis.
Yeah, and just to be clear, do I email, do I have to state it today or just email it to council?
No,
Or
you've got,
email it to staff?
what you would do is you're going to state that you're going to bring the motion forward at the next meeting, and then the wording gets emailed to staff.
Okay, so I'll email the wording, and the motion is that staff be instructed to prepare a report on implementing a policy for a CAO performance appraisal following the guidelines as set out by the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators.
Okay. Yeah, and then just forward that on to staff.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, any other notices of motion? Okay, we will move on to pull this up. Motions for the evening. So just I just want to, as we go through these, I just want to remind council and staff and those watching that we do have to go in camera for a property matter. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass the motions so that the public can see that, and we're going to pass some of the bylaws that will go into closed session, and the recording will stop. And just because of the very nature of how Zoom goes to live and YouTube, there will not be a live feed of us coming out of closed session. And then essentially what will happen at that, there'll be the confirming bylaw for council and the motion to adjourn. There'll be no other business after that. So just so that the public's aware, and as I say, we'll go through the motions, we'll pass 4 of the bylaws and agreements, and then coming out of closed will be the confirming bylaw and the adjournment motion. Okay, so that's the minutes. Resolved that the council receive report number FIN 04-2021 for information and approves the allocation of the unrestricted modernization funding as presented. A mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Regan and Councillor Westman. All opposed? And that's carried. And then resolve that council authorize staff to accept the tender from Clarence Carter and Sons for the supply, delivery, and spreading of granular M gravel for 2021. A mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Mastarakis and Deputy Mayor Manders. All opposed? And that's carried. Resolved that council authorize staff to accept the tender from Denmar Brines Limited in the amount of $67,460 for the supply of dust suppressants and road stabilization products in 2021. A mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Regan and Councillor Mastarakis. All opposed? And that's carried. Resolved that council accepts the recommendation of the Public Works Manager as noted in report number PW-07-2021 and further directs staff to proceed with Hannah Environmental Equipment, Inc. at the quoted repair cost of $53,000 plus HST. A mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Westman and Councillor Reagan. All opposed, and that's carried. So make sure I got them all. And so these are for the bylaws. Resolved that if no one cares to speak to these bylaws on their first, second, and third reading, that they be considered to have been read a first time and passed, read a second time and passed, read a third time and passed, and that they be numbered 16-2021, execution of Packet-Tel Corp. Agreement, 17-2021, committee appointment bylaw, 203-2021, removal of Holding Smith, 204-2021, removal of Holding Smith. A mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Reagan and Councillor Westman. All opposed, and that's carried. And then resolved that the council adjourn its regular meeting in order to conduct a closed session pursuant to section 239 of the Municipal Act for the purpose of a proposed or pending acquisition of land by the municipality. A mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Reagan and Councillor Mastarakis.